Not yet.
In a minute. Okay, welcome everyone. Welcome to OWASP London chapter 20th anniversary meetup. We're very pleased to be here at Google London offices. I believe this is an awesome venue to start our celebrations tonight. We're waiting for one more chapter leader for Sharif to join us. I think he's downstairs.
Okay.
But I think we're ready to start the introduction.
Sure, thank you. Welcome, everyone. It's really, really good to see so many people punctual, considering the weather. I just wanted to add this to remind you to come to me and ask for the limited edition sticker. So there are only 300 of them, obviously, just for this event. We'll be more than happy to give one per person. So please do let me know if you want one. We have a packed agenda today. We're going to do our introductions as quickly as possible and actually get to the reason why everybody's here. So the amazing talks. We have one guest speaker from Google, Harshvardhan, who is going to speak about the Google approach to remediating entire bug classes. We then kick off with Ivan and his talk about ModSecurity. Ivan's here. Thank you very much.
Then we're going to go into a break, and apologies, I think the food hasn't arrived yet, but it will be at the break.
Actually, it's arrived. It's downstairs. It's coming upstairs, so we're going to have food and drinks soon. Sorry about the delay.
And tell us something about the cake, Andra, the awesome cake with.
Yes, so we have a massive cake out there. Will hopefully cover quite a few people, and the logo on the cake is the sticker that you will be getting. Cool. After the break, we will listen to Dinis and Daniel, so the other two OGs of OWASP London. Sorry. Talk about application security and how it's changed and how AI is impacting it. And at the very end, if you guys have any questions, we'll have Slido is up and running. So if you go to slido.do and use the OWASP
as the code.
The code, yep. You'll be able to ask any questions. We'll take the questions all the way at the end. We'll also have a 10-15 minute really fun quiz for which we have a lot of prizes.
Some prizes are really, really nice. So please don't go home early because you have a chance to win a really cool prize. Actually, we have several of them. At least 3 I counted so far. Yeah,
for the top 3 people on the leaderboard. A bit more networking at the end, and then everybody can run away to the pub.
Yes, and we'll tell you how to get to the pub, but it's easy to find because basically exit the venue, turn right again, and you'll see
1 minute. Yeah.
You'll see the bar in front of you.
Perfect. Okay, cool. So just checking, we have anybody from Google that can welcome everyone? Not yet. I think they're still running around with the food and drinks, which is great. So
we'll have another opportunity for them to say a few words.
A bit later. Perfect. So yeah, a bit about the OWASP London chapter. These are the current 3 leaders. We're missing one. I think
he's on his way. He just texted me.
Yeah, he's going to be here soon. Sharif is going to be with us soon. Who here has never been to an OWASP meetup? Who's here for the first time? Okay, that is perfect. So this is how you can follow us. We're everywhere on social media. We're very active. So please go and follow us everywhere. And also, if you have any other questions about resources or how to get in touch with anyone in the OWASP Foundation, do ask us. We have a short video. So for everyone that doesn't know what OWASP is, here's
is a nonprofit that stands for the Open Web Application Security Project. OWASP is a community of developers, technologists, and evangelists improving the security of software through tools and resources. OWASP has 100 plus active projects, and new project applications are submitted weekly. Projects are open source and are built by our community of volunteers, people just like you. Community and networking. There are hundreds of local chapters worldwide and thousands of members. Meetings are free and open to everyone. They include training, talks, and networking opportunities. Education and training. OWASP hosts many events each year. They are a great way to improve your skills, build your professional network, and learn about new trends in the industry. One of the many ways you can get involved is to become a member. The membership benefits include discounts for events and trainings, your own OWASP email address and Google Workspace access, a vote in our OWASP Global Board elections. And recently, OWASP added a brand new member benefit, access to hands-on application security training through the OWASP Secure Flag Open Platform. Join us and become a member today.
Yes, so you saw the benefits of OWASP membership. I'm going to just add a few words that, of course, you will also, by becoming an OWASP member, you're actually donating to OWASP Foundation because we are a non-profit charity registered in the USA. The membership costs $50 per year for individuals. If you're a student, it's only $20 per year. If you are representing a company, you can become a corporate sponsor. We'll talk about corporate sponsors a little bit later. Now, there's something that I have which is quite exclusive. I have this OWASP member sticker. So those of you who are not OWASP members and just want to become tonight, you can go to owasp.org, click on join button and sign up. And if you show me the email confirmation, I will give you this exclusive OWASP member sticker. Obviously, that's a physical sticker, but later on I'll tell you about a digital sticker as well that we have. Also very quickly cover that by becoming an OWASP member, you also get some other OWASP membership benefits. Obviously, you heard about Secure Flag, which is an educational platform which will allow to teach your developers secure coding and also run internal competitions within your organization. We also have AppSec Phoenix, which is an application security posture management platform, which is available to all OWASP members for free. You just need to sign up with your owasp.org address. If you have any questions about what the platform does, we have the founder and CEO, Francesco, here at the back. There's also some offers from Security Journey for training, and Ubiq, which is a cloud-based encryption as a service platform, which might be useful to you as well. We're adding new benefits all the time. So if you represent a company which you think can help our OWASP members, our OWASP community, by providing their services or the platform to our members, please do speak to us and we will add it happily to the list of benefits.
I think we have our Google hosts with us if they would like to come in and welcome you all here. So let's just go back. Whoops, I hope it doesn't. Yes.
Yes.
There you go.
This works, yes. Hi everyone, how are you? Sorry, we've been running up and down. I think you've seen us downstairs, upstairs, in the elevator, but we made it.
Yes, so we are very glad to host the 20th anniversary of OWASP. We couldn't made it with the support, obviously, from OWASP itself.
Woo, yes.
And with you, right? So we've been running community events. We're very proud of supporting organizations like OWASP and having you here with us. So yeah, there's going to be a lot of fun. We just need to say some rules of...
Well, maybe first introduce
Oh,
yourself.
yes, first. Yes. So my name, if you don't know me yet, I'm Omar Sainz. I'm one of the security specialists here at Google, primarily working in Google Cloud. And I have...
Monica. I'm also one of the security specialists in Google Cloud and also now working also with the Red Team. So it's really nice to meet you all. And yeah, we have some house rules, as Omar was saying, so the boring part. So Omar, you want to say the boring part?
Yeah, so well, we're going to have, there's going to be some food a bit later. There's one cake, you saw that. So toilets are, if you haven't seen it yet, is on the right hand side. If you need to leave the building, you need someone from Google to escort you, okay? So this is the area reserved for us, you can move. There are a lot of projects from OWASP, so yeah, make sure you talk to people. If you are interested to know more about Google or the work that we do, yeah, we are here to help you. So anything else?
Well, nothing. Just enjoy. We're going to have a really nice agenda. We have a Google speaker come all the way from Zurich. I have to say it. And yeah, we have a lot of fun things today. And there's going to be food and drinks. And just have a nice time. Enjoy it. This is going to be your home for today. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you, Monica.
I'm going to go quickly. All right. If you would like to be a chapter supporter, like these guys, you can support us in two ways, either by donating or by sponsoring these meetups. So again, thank you, Google. We only have one Googler here, but still, it's good. So yeah, this is the list of people that have already hosted us, have sponsored our meetings before. If you'd like your logo here, come chat to us.
Yeah, if you have a similar venue and you can host us, please do come and talk to us.
As much space as possible would be amazing. Thank you. Sam?
Yes, so you saw a physical sticker that I'm going to give to everyone who is an OWASP member, but we started doing for the past year something called Proof of Attendance NFT or POAP. So this is actually an interesting NFT because you can only obtain it on the day of the event, and that proves digitally on the blockchain, hey, that you were actually here in person. And the way how you can prove it, because the only way to collect it is to speak to me and collect it through a special QR code, which I'm going to show on my phone. So there's no cheating. So please come and see it. And if you don't have a cryptocurrency wallet, you can install one of the cryptocurrency wallets available. Anyone which supports Ethereum blockchain will work. And yeah, and once you collect this the sticker, maybe it will encourage you to start your journey into the world of blockchain, Web3, and start understanding a little bit about the digital signatures as well.
I think it takes, yeah.
Yeah.
We have a couple of conferences coming up soon. So as you saw in the video, OWASP doesn't just organize these meetups, we organize bigger events as well. The next one coming up is in Lisbon in June, and then in September in San Francisco. For Lisbon, the call for papers is open, so if you'd like to attend, please have
Well, and if you'd like to present
exactly.
your talk, yes, the call for papers is now open for Lisbon, and will be open until April the 4th.
Okay, perfect. Now, coming back home, we have a screenshot of the first ever meetup and how it was organized. You can see that it was in October, so we wanted to start the celebrations now in February, and we're going to keep going for the whole year. And yeah.
So the three speakers tonight, Ivan, Dinis, and Daniel, are actually the three people who started OWASP London in a pub back in 2004. I think when I emailed Daniel, he replied with a very scared message saying, "This can't be 20 years. I swear it was yesterday." But yes, so these three guys got together 20 years ago in a pub, and they presented three talks. So Dan talked about OWASP testing phase, and Dinis talked about ASP.NET security. If you remember back in 2004, who was around, ASP.NET was the big thing. And Ivan, of course, spoke about ModSecurity, and his talk's going to cover 22 years of ModSecurity today. And of course, because there are only a bunch of people, they all managed to fit in a pub. And that pub is not particularly big. So as you can see, this is not a pub. All of you are here. And we are very pleased to have all the three founders with us tonight. And I actually NFT'd this screenshot to make sure we never, ever lose it. So if you go to OpenSea, you will actually find the NFT of it. So yes, 20 years. And this is 2024. And I think this is a perfect venue to start celebration.
Thank you, Sam. So a little bit about the history, as you've already heard, who our founders are. We also have a video from the chapter leader that started off in 2009.
From Justin. Yes,
Yes.
He's the OWASP chapter leader. He's not here with us tonight. He's on holiday, but he sent us a video message.
I'm not entirely sure. Can we play the video
Yep.
from the slides, please?
Let's see if our AV team manages to get us to see the video. I think it will open. Yes.
There we go.
Yeah. And we
Hey
need.
folks, it's Justin Clarkstock here. I was the OWASP chapter lead in London from 2009 to 2015. I'm not able to be there in person, so I thought I'd record this message and share a few of my memories from that time. I think a couple of them come to mind. I think firstly the AppSec 2014 research conference in Cambridge. That was one of the first times that we brought one of the major OWASP conferences to the UK. So I think that was a great kind of opportunity to kind of really show off what we could do. And we did that in conjunction with the Cambridge chapter. And the other things which come to mind were, for example, the OWASP summits that we had in Portugal. I didn't make it to the first one, but I did make it to the second one. And it was truly impressive, a lot of the work which went on at those summits and a lot of the industry engagement that we managed to get going as well. So 20 years, it's crazy that it's 20 years old at this point, but long may the OWASP London chapter go for another 20 years, and hopefully I can attend next time. So thank you all, bye-bye.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Many thanks to Justin for sending us this message. Let's see if we can get back to our main slide deck and introduce our first speaker.
Okay, so we have the Slido. I don't think it's...
Slido. Yeah, let's talk about Slido, how to ask questions today. Again, there's quite a lot of you in the audience. We do have handheld mics to collect questions from you, but if you see something that will prompt a question throughout the talks, please use the online system. Just go to Slido and type OWASP. That is the code for tonight, and you can ask it, and then we will make sure the question gets voiced.
Towards the end of the meetup.
Yeah, that's right.
Perfect. So our first speaker is Harsh from Google. Thank you very much. Good luck.
Thank you.
And Harsh is going to talk to us about how Google approaches remediating bug classes.
Is the mic working yet?
We're in a green screen. Can you?
It's going somewhere.
Let me just do this first. Okay, that's good. So if you come out of that, sometimes when you're already in there,
Yeah, it's harder.
right? Good. Okay, go slowly.
work yet. Yeah. It does detect the display.
Keep changing. Still green screen.
Okay. Alright. Let's do that. Yeah, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Always the hardest part is to get. Let's do that. Yeah, let's do that.
Try and kick this stop.
works now. Yes, so sorry about the delay. 20 years of OWASP, 2024, it seems, is finally the year of the Linux desktop. So yeah, I'm Harsh. Thanks for having me. I'm going to talk about our approach to remediating vulnerability classes at Google Cloud. A little bit about me. I'm an information security engineer at PSE, that's Product Security Engineering. We do product security for all Google Cloud products. I specifically work on remediations, which is what this talk is about. I've also done security assessments, vulnerability research, a bit of software engineering. I, in fact, started out as a software engineer at Google earlier. That's the brief agenda for today's talk. We're going to talk about what we mean by remediations, life of a typical remediation, and then we're going to talk about a couple of case studies to give you a better idea of how we do these. So yeah, what are remediations? So this is a bit of an overloaded term in the industry. Here we are mostly talking about fixing classes of bugs rather than individual instances of bugs. And that's the only way it can scale at Google, because there's multiple products, lots of services, hundreds of APIs, tens of thousands of developers. So whenever possible, we try to do horizontal improvements that fix bugs in multiple products rather than chasing individual teams to do changes in their product. What they're not is vulnerability management. So we have separate mature programs for fixing vulnerabilities, for incident response, where there are actively exploited bugs or exploitable bugs and the like. Remediation comes after we have done the firefighting. So why do we even need to do these projects? Since everything's supposed to be secure by default, and that's actually what we always try to do. Right from the start, we've tried to make things secure by default, which means that the libraries and the frameworks that software engineers use should be secure by default. It should be harder for them to introduce bugs in the first place. So we have secure libraries and frameworks that try to counter most of the OWASP top 10, for example, XSS and SQL injection bugs. For SQL injection bugs in particular, most of our database APIs will only accept what's called a trusted SQL string. And there it is enforced by the compiler that if you're specifying a query string to the database, it comes from a string literal. So it's known at compile time that there is no user input in that string. Similarly, we have safe HTML for XSS. If you want to generate HTML, it has to come from like a static variable. And that's the approach that has helped us counter a lots of bug classes. Similarly, if we talk about cloud, then a lot of APIs will want to access customer resources. So BigQuery, for example, might want to read an object in Google Cloud Storage for a customer. And here we want to make sure that whatever identity we use for that access uses least privileges. So in this case, we have what are called service agents, which are special service accounts, which have permissions just on the right project and just for the specific resources that are being accessed. And they can only be used by BigQuery in this case. Similarly, for authorization, confused deputy bugs are, they're always hard to deal with. And a lot of teams, most of the cloud APIs will use Cloud IAM for authorization checks. Originally, teams would make their own API calls, RPC calls to Cloud IAM. They would check for specific permissions on specific resources. But then what we have eventually moved to is declarative authorization checks, where instead of having this error-prone pattern with everyone checking things in code, teams just declare their IAM configs. They specify what resources and what permissions they want to check, and the frameworks take care of doing those checks. And all of these things work great. If you want to learn more about this kind of stuff, there's a book. It's called Building Secure Systems, Secure and Reliable Systems, and it's also free to read online. But in spite of all these things in place, bugs do creep through. Like this one. So that was perfect timing. But yeah, bugs do slip through. And we also come across new vuln classes all the time, which we had not anticipated in the past. There's lots of sources for these bugs. There's awesome security researchers who keep sending us bug reports. That's the Google Bug Hunters program. Some of you may know it as VRP, or the Vulnerability Reward Program. There's some awesome security researchers internally who keep finding novel bugs all the time. We do OffSec exercises or red teams And then we also do security assessments. So these are tied to specific products. So every time there's a new launch or also post-launch, we do assessments of security products. And we keep finding new bug classes. And that's where remediations come in. So we want to first fix the latent bugs. So we found a bug, we fixed it, but then there could be variants. So that's the brown field. So we fix the brown field, and then we want to make sure that there is no backsliding, and we prevent recurrences in new products. So that's the green field, so to say. So it always starts with a vulnerability. The first thing to do is fix it first. Again, we have mature vulnerability management programs. We have incident response teams. And after they're done with the work, we come in and take a look at the bug and try to see what went wrong. So one of the questions we ask ourselves is, was it a one-off? If it's like an implementation bug in the business logic of a specific API, maybe there's not much more we can do. We fix it and carry on. But if it is something that's likely to have variants, we want to make sure that we find those variants and we fix them. Another thing we ask is it something that we could have taken off the developer's plate? So developer education is good, and it really helps us when software engineers are aware of security pitfalls. But if you want to scale security, it's not a very reliable method. So we want to make sure that security teams do as much as they can to make it easier for developers to write safe code. Another thing that we do is we try to see if we have seen a similar bug in the past. And this is sort of where we run into limits of being data-driven. So we have all these data sources from VRP to internal vulnerability research, and that gives us clusters of bugs. But then in the end, somebody with security expertise has to sit down and see what went wrong, and that's how we're able to identify patterns. I've done this a few times. It may sound painful to go through 100 bugs trying to root cause them, but it's a really enriching exercise where I'm able to actually figure out what are the patterns that we're seeing. And as we do more of this, these sort of analysis become easier. The next step is to figure out if there are other products that could have the same bug. And at Google, we have a monorepo with code from all the products. We also have this thing called one version policy. So there's always a single version of every library, which makes it much easier to query for risky code patterns. At the same time, we have tons of internal infra and databases, which helps us query the state of our production systems. So this will, for example, help us find misconfigurations rather than like code issues. But having all of this, there's always new bugs, and there's always unique data that we're in need of. So at those points, we don't have to be afraid of building new tooling. So I'll talk about a variant analysis exercise that we did for parser differentials. So this was the original bug. So I found this bug in Google's API infra. So to give you some context, there are tons of APIs that rely on some common API infra, and they delegate common functionality like authorization, quota checks, telemetry to this central infrastructure. And then we have a central identity service, which checks our authenticators and does a lot of other identity-related stuff. Now the API infra in this case, it accepted signed JWT tokens, JSON Web Tokens from the end users. The JWTs would be issued to service accounts, and they were signed by a special privileged service account. The API infra in this case, if the JWT was signed by this specific privileged service account, it would skip some authorization checks. And then it would pass it on to the identity service, which is the central service that verifies these authenticators. So the identity service would make sure that the signature, for example, matched up. So this would be the expected JWT payload. So at the top, you'll see special claims, which specified that some permissions had already been checked, so there was no need to do additional checks. So these were the claims. And then if you see, the issuer would be a trusted service account. So how this would work is the API infra from the previous slide that would take a look at the issuer, The issuer in this case is the privileged service account, so it decides that it can skip some checks. The job will be passed on to the identity service, which will then verify the signature. And if it has indeed been signed by this service account, the checks would be successful, and then the API infra would declare that the authorization checks succeeded. But what an attacker can do is you can have an additional issuer field here. In this case, this has some weird characters you'll see, which are unpaired UTF-16 surrogates. And with this, what happens is the API infra and the identity service, they look at different fields, and then when they try to read the issuer, they see different issuers for the same payload. That's because they're using different JSON parsers. So the API infra will see the second issuer, which is the first issuer, which is the privileged account, so it will skip the checks. The identity system will see the second one, so it's going to use that service account to verify the signature, and that is going to succeed. So for this kind of bug, it becomes harder to look for variants, because if you think about it, neither service did anything horribly wrong. They parsed the payload and they used a central service to do the verification. And before we found this bug, we had already kind of concluded an exercise where we made sure that only the known good parsers are being used across Google Infra. So just using Google good parsers doesn't guarantee much here, because the JSON spec can be vague. And even with robust parsers, there will be differences. So we started an exercise to find similar instances of parser differentials. So a colleague of mine, Andra, did all the hard work on this one. He built a fuzzing infrastructure where we would use fuzzers like libfuzzer and AFL to send random inputs to a central server. The central server would pass it on to different parser backends, which were running different JSON parsers. And if there was a difference in the output returned by the parser, so if it was a successful parsing but the results were different, those would be staged. We would minify the results. And this gave us a lot of good examples of JSON like parser differentials. So now that we had this set of known bad parsers, we need to identify what are the services that could potentially be vulnerable. And for this one, again, we were lucky to have a lot of data already available to us. We have up-to-date databases of RPC dependencies, what service is calling what other service. Profiling data, which includes sampled stack traces, which will tell you what functions are being called. Dependency graph for packages, and a mapping from production workloads to packages. So we built tooling to basically put this all together and identify services which we should then prioritize for the remediation. So after variant analysis is to provide a fix, and one of the core principles here for us is empathy for the developer. So we have awesome software development teams that build great products. They have a lot of things on their mind, and security is, to be realistic, only one of those things. It's not always the top priority. So we want to make sure that we don't get in the way of building products. And when we try to make large-scale changes, we try to make sure that we do at least 80% of that work, and only 20% is delegated to individual teams that are going to, eventually they have to make some change, they have to take some action, but we try to keep it as small as possible. We try not to force security mandates on lots of teams. And to do this in a safe manner, we try to first build horizontal monitoring. If such monitoring already exists, we try to just use that. By horizontal monitoring here, I mean that we try to collect information. For example, if we talk about parser differentials, we would collect what services were using specific parsers, whether they were actually affected. And then as we roll out the changes, I mean, security-related changes are no different from other changes. We need to make sure that we do that in a reliable manner. We don't break production. So for this, one technique is to run things in a dark launch mode. With dark launch, we sort of try to do the checks that we would do eventually that would maybe reject some requests, but we only log it. Once we are sure that we are in a safe situation, we are in a safe position, we try to then enforce the checks. And then once you fix this, you don't want to do it again in 6 months. So you want to prevent backsliding. You want to make sure that new code that's written is also safe. And some of the techniques we use there are pre-submit checks. These are part of our CI/CD pipelines, where you try to make sure that things are caught early. Also, with the one version policy and having a monorepo, we can impose restrictions on what libraries can be used by what products. So what we do typically is we allow list everything that is already using a known unsafe library. And then for every new use, you need to get an approval. So just make sure that there is no unchecked usage of the safe library before we try to get rid of it. And then for enforcement, we try to use some central choke points. For example, if there are known insecure configs, we try to make sure that those are taken care during admission control so they don't go to production. If there are so I mentioned declarative IAM checks. So for things like that, we will make sure that unsafe API configurations, for example, a team could be testing something before they launch it, and they may annotate their IAM config with no checks required, just to check. But then we want to make sure that before that goes to production, our central infrastructure for API deployment, make sure that it doesn't happen. So another example of a similar exercise where we tried to make sure that we provide a safe replacement was this vulnerability. It was reported in Istio by Anthony, who's also on our team now. And the bug here was that this specific service, Istio's deployment controller, it was using Go's text template package to craft YAML, which was then used to create a Kubernetes resources. And in this case, it was using an annotation service type annotation, which was user supplied. And a text template is just a string substitution. So it would just substitute that string with the user provided annotation and spin up the Kubernetes resources. And this is again like a classic injection attack. You could have a new line and then you can inject arbitrary YAML. And this would allow you to escalate privileges. You could, for example, create arbitrary resources in any namespace, including privileged pods. So this one was not as easy when it came to variant analysis, because if teams are using a text template, they could be using it for something which is not YAML. If they're using a YAML library, that could be a way of finding usages of YAML. But then in this case, since they're not using a YAML library, they're using a generic string library, it became a bit harder to find a variance. So we adopted some heuristics and found some variance. And what we did here was we built a wrapper around a text template, which had an additional algorithm to make sure that injection attacks were not possible. And then we went about and asked the users who we had identified to use this new library. And to make sure that it doesn't reoccur, we used like linters and pre-submit checks. And this library is now open source, along with a couple of other safe text libraries. And once you're done with the exercise, you still need to provide an escape hatch in most cases. So by an escape hatch, I mean an opt-out. So because there will always be different teams with different requirements, and even if you think that a vulnerability is really severe, there will always be a corner case where it doesn't make sense for them to adopt your safe approach. Some teams may have like a different threat model. Other times they may have additional checks in place, which sort of make your checks redundant. Sometimes there are features that are useful for debugging. For example, the JVM debug port, if it's enabled and it's exposed to an attacker, that's pretty much RCE. But if you get rid of it, yes, you'll make things secure, but then you'll also have hundreds of developers who are mad at security. And the next time you go to them with a security ask, they might not be as receptive. So for things like this, we try to not break developer workflows. So in this case, for example, we would still allow the JVM debug port to run in dev and test environments, but we would block its use in production. And then there's always a requirement to accept some residual risk. If you have thousands of workloads and you have done your prioritization exercise, you can call it done at one point without relying on 100% of the workloads to be fixed, because you know the risks and it doesn't make sense to fix everything. I hope that makes sense. Thank you all for listening. If you have time for questions, I can take some questions now, or we can chat later.
I think we're going to have a longer Q&A session later, so please please submit your questions now. Just one question from me on the pre-commit checkers and linters. Do you actually insist on breaking the build for developers so they break their pipeline?
Yes, we do. We actually have our sibling team, which is called ISE Hardening. Those are the folks that build CF-YAML and Trusted SQL String. And the motto for them is, if it is not secure, it should not compile. So we do break builds. And again, we can be a lot more prescriptive when it comes to the greenfield. When we are talking about new code being written, we can be a lot more prescriptive and make sure that it is done in the one right way. When we talk about remediations, where we are going back and fixing things that have already been built and deployed, we have to take a softer approach.
Okay, and how do you provide the escape hatch in such places?
So for example, in case of safe HTML, it could be library whitelisting, the stuff I briefly mentioned. So for any new user that wants to use it, they cannot include it in their build unless they get a security approval. So we would take a look at their commit, at their code, make sure it is safe, and only then allow it to be used. At other times, if it is something that is not as risky, we make it self-service. So we are not stuck doing rubber stamping for things where the product team has a better idea. So in those cases, we allow teams to opt out with a justification.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And please hang around for the Q&A session later.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Right. I would like to invite next speaker to the stage. By the show of hands, how many of you heard of, used, or seen the website which gives your website a grade on SSL? You know, A grade, B grade, C grade. How good is your SSL? Right. So do you know that this man is the person who created it? And not just that, I know some of you used his book, which is Apache Security.
I don't know which one you mean.
ModSecurity handbook.
Yeah, there's Bulletproof TLS and PKI as well. I like to write books, what can I say?
Exactly. So Ivan is behind, I think, almost every single TLS security book, talk, presentation, research. So I think he's
not research, definitely not.
Well, I'm pretty sure I saw you talk at the RSA when you were talking about it. But I believe the SSL Labs was then later sold on to Qualys.
Yes. Qualys were really nice, and they adopted it, and they financed it for quite a few years, and I was quite happy there until they stopped maintaining it, and then I left. So that's basically it.
Great. And
there's a story. There's a lesson in there.
There's a story. I think then you moved on to Hardenize when you created the cloud-based service, and at the moment you are the Chief Science Officer at Sift.
That's right.
Okay, let's welcome.
So there's a line in my slides. I'm a compulsive builder, so that explains a lot of things. My wife in particular, she's really mad at me, and she can't stand me because every day I come up with 5 different ideas of things we can do, and then I try to do them, which is kind of a bit unnerving for my wife. So the clicker does work. So I'll be honest, when I started to write this, I created this slide, that was almost the end of my presentation, because I started to look at myself, and the question became really philosophical. I started to question myself, who am I really? And then I completely forgot about the things that I was meant to be working on. I guess why I'm talking here today is the fact that I created ModSecurity, and I presented about ModSecurity at the very first OWASP chapter meeting. I'm very flattered that you guys, well, at least some people here consider me to be the founder of OWASP London. I most definitely am not. I just show up on the day. I did run the chapter a couple of years later and just tried to keep the fire going. And actually, it's quite. I'm chuffed that there's so many of you here in this room today. Actually, when I was doing things, if we could get 40 people, I mean that was something I would consider a success. So to see some 250 people here, that's fantastic. So keep it up. Anyway, I did quite a lot of things after. As I said, I'm a compulsive builder, so SSL Labs is a thing that a lot of you may be familiar with because it eventually ended up being quite useful and popular. Then I went on to create something called Hardinize, which is very similar. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. Hardinize.com is free. It's very much in the same vein as SSL Labs. You go there, input your domain name, and we will test everything from your DNS, email, TLS, PKI, web application security, and so on and so forth. I write books, and now I'm a chief scientist at Sift. So what I'd like to talk about today is basically, in some ways, it's going to be a personal story. In some other ways, it's going to be, I feel quite old, but I've been on this journey of creating an open source project, starting something. And I remember those days, it was very exciting, and I thought, oh, I had an opportunity to do something exciting and something different. And it succeeded in some ways, and didn't succeed in some other ways. And I thought maybe on the 20th anniversary, maybe 22nd anniversary of ModSecurity, it would be useful to go back and see if there are some lessons to see. This is very timely as well, because just a couple of months ago, maybe even less than a month, actually TrustWave, the most recent owner of ModSecurity, transferred ownership to OWASP. So OWASP actually owns the code I originally created 22 years ago, which is kind of very circular, isn't it? Because I was kind of at the OWASP London chapter meeting 20 years ago. So we're kind of running around and a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to skip over quite a few slides. But if you think web application security is bad today, you should have seen it in 2002. And I think it's pretty much safe to say that no one really knew about cross-site scripting. Pretty much every application was vulnerable to cross-site scripting, and nobody knew about the SQL injection. So for me, the context was I was in charge of a development team, and we were working on web applications, and I was really unhappy. And famously, I was used to saying I had trouble sleeping at night because I was ultimately responsible. But I knew that there were a bunch of people there, and who weren't quite up to date, and no one was actually, to be honest. In those days, we didn't really know a lot of the things. So I thought, well, maybe there's something I can do about this. This is where the line. I think I may have missed one slide. There's a slight lag on the clicker, so I have to wait about 5 seconds until it changes, if it changes. Anyway, there was one slide there, but this is the first ever. So for the purposes of this talk, I just went and collected a bunch of screenshots to see what things looked like. This is the first ever ModSecurity website, and I started at some point in 2002. I don't really know. The first public record is November 2002. And then things started to basically kind of go on and on. Actually, at the time, those of you, I think the clicker is definitely wonky. Those of you who may remember the time, back in the day, the question of open security and how you commercialize it, that was a very much an open thing. And there was one company called JBoss, and JBoss were in the business of selling open source support. And it was all around their suite of products, which are mainly Java application servers. So there was, basically, I was here in Britain in 2004. I had no job. I had a work permit. I had no job. And I made a leap of faith and decided to start this open source project, thinking that I'll figure it out as I go along. And I looked at JBoss, and JBoss made something like 65 million in a year. And they were sold to Red Hat for, I don't know, 300 million or something like that. So I did what you were supposed to do. I started a business, created this is a very nice, pretty website. And I kind of figured out that I would figure out the business model as I go along. By the way, if you meet me afterwards, and if you find me afterwards, I can give you a masterclass of choosing bad names for your products and companies. Thinking Stone is that company. We've heard it called Sinking Stone or even Stinky Stone. So yeah. By the way, if you think that's bad, if you think about ModSecurity, by the way, if you don't know, the reason ModSecurity is called ModSecurity is because of the MOD. There's a standard prefix all Apache modules use, so it stands for module. And then I figured my module has something to do with security, so I'm going to call it that. Unfortunately, and to my defense, I was fairly fresh back then. In this country, MOD has a very specific meaning and stands for the Ministry of Defense. And that got a lot of people confused. So I will tell you that at one point, I got a publication to my home address, addressed to Technical Director of the Ministry of Defense. I wish I kept it. It would be a very nice memento anyway. And I would show up at conferences, and they would see ModSecurity, and they would start to talk shop to me like I was one of them, which I most definitely was not. Anyhow, I'll see if the clicker is working so I can kind of advance. And we're going back. It's very slow. Or I can just improvise maybe. Okay, well, this is the data sheet. This is the first. I'm just going to speed up and talk about interesting things. This is the website. We did everything well. And here we are. We are there. OWASP London meeting. And I just showed up, drank a pint of beer and presented. And by this time, I was kind of pitching my business and was trying to make it work. And what eventually happened is ModSecurity did solve a niche. And I ended up having quite a few users, and there were a lot of happy users. One thing I learned later on, because ModSecurity was eventually acquired, it's really important for the acquisition that you have a good record of how many users you actually have. Because what happened is that as they were doing their due diligence, when they realized that I actually don't have any customers, then my wife and I were taking a walk outside, and we were convinced it wasn't going to happen. The acquisition was going to be cancelled. Thankfully, that didn't happen. We didn't have good download numbers, and what we also did, we actually allowed ModSecurity to be distributed freely because open source did it is. It was in Debian, it was in Red Hat, whatnot. So people were getting it from the operating system, and we couldn't really prove that we had how many tens of thousands of users and so on and so forth. So there was one really nice slide where it says we only had a handful of customers. There's one company that has a bad rep, and that's Oracle, and a lot of people don't like Oracle. I will tell you that Oracle is the only company that licensed ModSecurity from us to include it with their own Apache distribution. And actually that money at that time wasn't a huge amount, but meant a lot to us because it was by far the biggest chunk of revenue we've had. Anyway, a big breakthrough came when we participated in a kind of bake-off against, if you have to realize, back then it was just me. And I went to compete with, I have this, actually there's another slide. So this goes back and forth. I don't know what. I'm sorry. So what actually happened is that there was a Forrester who are analysts. They run a competitive analysis of a bunch of web application files, and actually ModSecurity came obviously by far the most popular. And also, but it was praised for kind of strategic direction and whatnot. What ModSecurity was different because it was a precision tool. A lot of web application files at the time, I don't know if today, they're just black boxes, and maybe they do something, maybe they don't. With ModSecurity, it's a difficult tool to use. You have to tell it exactly what you want, but it will do exactly what you tell it to do. So if you know what you're doing, it's going to be perfect, and it's not a black box. And that was a very fresh approach. I don't know if things have changed. In any case, one of the vendors who were also in the competition, they scored poorer than I did, and they had money I didn't. So a couple of months later, Breach Security acquired my company, and that was kind of the end of kind of my company thinking stone and so on and so forth. So the job, I'm just going to keep talking without the slides and see what and then if these slides catch up, I'll tell you what they're about. That actually made things easier later on because I was no longer alone. And the company provided additional resources, and here they are. Offer Shizaf, he was actually instrumental in the acquisition itself. He was one who believed in ModSecurity. Brian joined as the primary developer. Ryan joined and worked on the core rule set, worked on the community. It was really nice as a sole founder, only a couple of years, to kind of be a part of a group, and you don't have really to fight this fight alone. As it happens, every founder leaves after an acquisition, and there are various reasons for that. I couldn't really. I think I generally struggle with my identity after my company is acquired. I've done a few of these, and it always happens to you. You're very motivated, and then you're not, because you yearn for something, and then you get it, and then I need a couple of months every time to figure out, okay, well, what now? But I think I left mostly because I wasn't happy with the state of web application firewalls, because they were kind of turning to be more like intrusion detection systems, where they were not precision tools, but they're just, oh, let's see, we'll throw everything at the rules and see what sticks. And I was fundamentally unhappy with that. I always believed in the use of web application firewalls for virtual patching, whereas you have a vulnerability, but it will take you a month to fix it, and you just write your rules, nice rules, robust rules, to defend, hold the fort until the time that you actually patch things. And I didn't really want to participate in the industry. Anyway, I decided to leave, and by 2009 it will have been a few years anyway, so it's time certainly for something new. I did leave a gift. I kind of see it as a gift to the community. I sat down and wrote the book, and I wrote down everything I knew about ModSecurity. I wrote in the book. If you know anything about writing books, there's no money to make in this industry. So it definitely wasn't for money. This is a screenshot for the second edition. Christian Follini, who is a co-lead of the core rule set in 2017, worked with me on the second edition because he was interested in that. I wasn't, so I just worked as an editor. And then I went to do other things. I think this is a point in my presentation where slides are going to be more important. So let's see if they're going to appear. Yes, so a couple of other things happened. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go talk slower than the slides, because I need to use them as a cue. What happened then, breach security unfortunately didn't do very well. And then what happened is that they were acquired by TrustWave, and a fantastic thing happened right then. TrustWave actually relicensed ModSecurity under the Apache software license, which was fantastic and a great improvement. I chose GPL specifically because I thought there would be a case to build a business model around the fact that it's GPL, and if anyone wanted to bundle ModSecurity, they will have to get a commercial license from me. So obviously, I love open source, but you have to pay your bills. Actually, on the day that we sold ModSecurity, we were maxed out on all our credit cards. I keep telling everybody, it was one of those moments that you would typically see in a film. We had zero money. Actually, we were negative. And I had a contract to get a job and ready. I just needed to sign it. And it was waiting to see if the acquisition fell through, I would sign the contract. I never signed the contract. Anyway. And then the core rule set was transferred to OWASP, and then TrustWave eventually decided to give up on ModSecurity, and then transferred as well the ownership of the trademark and the name and everything, and now it's all in OWASP. So prior to this slide, I had post-mortem on the as kind of the next section, because this is the part where we kind of think, okay, some things went well, some things didn't go well. What are those? I think one thing that works is that ModSecurity, at least version 2.0, 2.x, is ubiquitous and it's everywhere. It's a very useful tool and it's robust and it worked. So ModSecurity, for better or worse, shaped the industry. I think the worst part is, for me, is that the rule language actually looks like what it looks like because it's part of Apache, and you have to follow the same syntax and everything else of the Apache web server. So I'm a little bit sad that a lot of other people who have nothing to do with Apache anymore still have to follow this very obscure syntax, and it's not really very, very easy to use. We had to jump through a lot of hoops to make sure that we abuse the available syntax and everything else so that to make things work. Another thing that worked really well is that a community formed. But the community, unfortunately, didn't form around the ModSecurity code base. It did form around the OWASP core rule set. And this is a credit to the people who kind of started this project and run it for very many years. I personally think this is the better part of what's left, what's been created by ModSecurity, and this was the really exciting bit. Unfortunately, it didn't happen during my time there, but it's never too late. And now it's unified under OWASP. The other thing that I really liked is, even though none of the vendors actually wanted to be a part of the ModSecurity community, there were no contributions to the source code at all. I know for a fact a lot of people, well, for some definition they work a lot, use ModSecurity in their products. There were gateways and web application firewalls with ModSecurity, bundling it technically illegally because the license wouldn't allow it, but no one really cared. I didn't bother chasing them. Unfortunately, we could have done something else. Interestingly enough, Cloudflare is a very big name. Probably not a lot of people know they use ModSecurity to bootstrap their business. So they use bootstrap ModSecurity while they didn't have anything else. Eventually, they built something better now. So I'm pretty happy in that sense. So this is the other slide about the core rule set. There's some things that didn't work, and I'm not quite happy with. And that's basically that ModSecurity could have been much more. And I suppose it's my fault for leaving, and I would have probably taken it in a different direction, but I chose, it was my decision to leave, because there are many things that open source web application firewalls haven't explored, like machine learning, focusing maybe on session monitoring, event monitoring, user tracking, going more into business rules tracking. We haven't seen like a nice tool to aggregate various events, a user interface tool, so that you can examine your events and you can work with them, visual editors to edit the rules, and a bunch of other things that could have happened but didn't happen. But anyway, I mean, this is no one's fault, of course. It's basically a reflection of who we are and the communities we have. I don't want to end on a bad note, actually. I'm very proud of what's happened. Well, I don't like the word proud, but what's happened with ModSecurity, even with words and everything, we have pushed the boundaries of human knowledge just a little bit in a very small way. So I saw an illustration a while ago where the human knowledge is illustrated like if this is a circle, and then this is all we know. And then when you do a PhD, you just make a tiny dent on this circle, and you push this boundary of the knowledge. Well, that's what we are. We were just a little dent. We pushed a little bit. You can hardly see it, but even when we made some mistakes, at least there's going to be new open source projects, new companies who are going to learn from ModSecurity's mistakes and do something that's better. And I think that's another slide here. Now it works. Open source worked and the code survived. Hey, I think that's a fantastic thing. This is the bad thing. I think this, it's almost worked there for a second. But that's it. I don't really have any more slides. I think I have only thank you very much, and if you have any questions, I'd love to talk to you.
So there is one question on the slide, though. Ivan, how do you continue to find time with supporting your open source repositories? Too many people take open source for granted without offering any support. Well,
I don't really. I mean, so I think I've done my share of supporting open source. If that's the only question, I've changed. So ModSecurity is the last thing I did is open source for no particular reason, but for the next project for SSL Labs, I chose to make it free, but it wasn't open source. And I don't know, there isn't a particular reason. Maybe because I like to work by myself. I know what I like, and if you want to participate in open source, you have to participate genuinely. You have to be part of a team, and to be honest, that takes much more effort. And sometimes when you don't have a lot of time, you do what you can. And then if it can't be open source, at least it can be free. So all my things since have been free, SSL Labs and Hardenized. I think I'm making a lot of my books for free, some are not. But I hope that answers that question.
Excellent.
I think for example, we shouldn't be making open source with an expectation that people give back. I think I prefer to think about it as expanding the boundaries of the knowledge of the human race and whatnot. And then if it's useful to someone, great. If not, that's great as well.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, everyone, we are going to go into a break. So hopefully Google team got the food and drink sorted out. We also have a few booths with a couple of sponsors. And we also have booths which are showcasing OWASP projects. I'm going to be showcasing OWASP the Attacker project. Please, as you eat your food and you drink your drinks, please do come up to the booths and check out OWASP projects, and also check out our sponsors who helped us to make this event happen. Thank you.
bare foot if you want.
Where's your fucking feet?
I know, man. I had an injury in the back, so I had to go back.
Everyone, please take your seats.
How long do I have? What time?
Just as much as you want. Don't worry. Right. Okay, everyone. So we're ready for our next talk. So I'm very pleased to introduce our next speaker because I am in application security because of this guy. And I know at least two guys in the audience who are in the application security industry because of Dinis. Because we met him early in our career. And when we saw him present, well, my jaw literally just hit the floor. I just couldn't believe that I could consume so much useful information at the speed that Dinis was giving to me. And then I remember we went to the OWASP Global AppSec conference in Rome. Yeah. And Dinis turns up barefoot on stage, puts his slides, and starts shooting at the incredible speed of these slides at the audience. We have to understand, right? This is Italy. Italians are fast. And there was a guy who stood up for a question and said, you know what, we're Italians, we speak fast, but oh my God, I thought my brain was going to melt, but it's a strange thing because I managed to understand everything. So this is what's great about Dinis because it's just an unbelievable source of knowledge in our industry. It's been there since day one. Of course, he's the guy who founded you. Also, at the beginning, we shared a screenshot of the first ever OWASP London meeting, how Daniel, Dinis, and I got together in a pub and had the first meetup. And Dinis was talking about ASP.NET security. Yeah. And I think following this talk, it kind of transpired because Dinis did a lot of research into what then became SAST tools. How many people use SAST scanners, right? Okay. Yeah. This guy was responsible for making one of the first SAST scanners. And there was an OWASP project called O2, yeah. Which stands for Ounce Open. Because of Ounce Labs was the name of the company, which got acquired by IBM. That product became AppScan.
Source.
And then later, I think HCL owns it. Well, basically.
No idea.
Yeah, but that was great. And Dinis, throughout his career, done a lot of stuff, done big consultancy companies. Currently, Dinis has somehow managed to become CISO of 2 companies at the same time. I saw the announcement, so we still think that
only one, no?
Okay.
Actually, I'm not even CISO, I'm a chief scientist.
Yes, chief scientist. Again, if you're going to go to our OWASP London YouTube channel, which I highly encourage you to do, you will find a lot of talks by Dinis, and I encourage you to watch them. You'll appreciate it because I'm pretty sure you will learn a lot. And
at speed.
And last year I made a huge mistake because I contacted Dinis and said, dude, are you using ChatGPT for AppSec? And he said, no. And I'm like, okay, let me send you a couple of things. And then, Sam, this is amazing. And then what I did, I'm not going to play it now. I said, okay, just to convince you how cool it is, I found a service who can, AI service, which writes a rap song. So I asked this AI tool, right? It wasn't ChatGPT, by the way, to write a rap song about Dinis Cruz from OWASP. Oh my God. Dinis, then what have you done? Now my whole family is hooked. They keep listening to this song. And then Dinis kind of got hooked, and then it transpired into his research into GenAI for application security. Yep. Please, everyone, welcome Dinis Cruz.
No, he's very kind. By the way, this is a little bit out of date because I'm not anymore with Holden Barrett. I'm now going to focus on GenAI, which is really cool. And by the way, if you think GenAI is going to be massive, you have no idea. I think is the biggest thing I've seen for a long time. So I'm going to speak very fast. I'm going to accelerate a lot. And actually, like you said, most of the comments I have is it was super fast, but I understood everything. So for me, it means that it kind of works reasonably well. So it's 2024. Actually, I just reused those photos, right? So that's from 7th October. I actually found, I think, one of the first ones from 25th of July, 2020. Actually, no, from 2011, right? 2004, sorry, that I sent. And so, and I haven't had an interesting, looking back on this. And one of the things that I would say, especially maybe for the younger generation here, it's okay to be ignored, right? You play the long game, right? It's okay, right? As long as you have your own ideas and you put things out and you open source stuff. Like I was that crazy to beat up Microsoft publicly, right, on ASP.NET, right, as you guys can see here, right? And this is me publishing. And at the time, they didn't have a good sense of humor, right? So I think now probably they'll be a bit different, right? Although the thing that's interesting about this is like you publish these things and you think sometimes you get it right, sometimes you get it wrong. I actually think I was right in a lot of things, right? And I think there's a lot of cool stuff in here. I was wrong about the share hosting because I thought there would be more exploitations happening, right? And he hasn't. So, which is an interesting thing, right? Because I still feel that in AppSec we got away with a lot. In the past, I don't think we will in the medium term. But I think in the past, we got away. A lot of business got away with not having a lot of security apps. And we from the generation that we were like, this is a big thing, and we went from everybody ignoring to people like going, ooh, actually maybe it is something important, right? So here's the thing, right? So AppSec is not about application security. Right, let's just be clear, right? AppSec is about good engineering, architecture, risk management, project management, asset. Oh, that's asset, sorry. Asset. By the way, I was finishing up the slides just before. Asset data, CIA, information, observability, resilience, and instance response, right? Like, you get all of these right, you don't need AppSec. Right? It is that simple, right? I once had this really cool conversation with an insane engineer, and he looked me in the eyes, and he was one of the big cloud providers. He says, we don't have an AppSec team. I was like, what? I was like, come on, how can you do it? And he said, tell me anything you do in AppSec. And I was like, well, all right, data validation. You go, of course we do data validation. You think what thing are we doing here? Authentication, authorization, logging, everything you can think of AppSec, right? Or application security. They were doing it, right? Because it was a good engineering practice. Because they had that level of maturity. Now, there's not that many teams in the world that can do that, right? I think the problem here is scale. But I've always, for a while, had this idea that, when we tell the developers, right, are doing it wrong, which is something that we tell a lot, right? We miss a big trick, which is the developers are the ones who are least responsible for writing insecure code, right? When you say developers should know better, developers don't know what they're doing, they don't care, you are immediately saying you don't understand what you're talking about. Right? Because the developers, and you should develop. Look, I code, right? This is actually, me. I think I am because I code, right? Developers have the least amount of impact, right? Themselves, the personal, the individual, right? On writing secure code, writing secure applications. Is the ecosystem around that. You can get the best, most experienced developer in the planet. You put them in an environment where they have crazy deadlines, they don't have good CI pipelines, they don't understand the side effects they're doing, they work with frameworks they never worked before, they're going to write insecure code. It is that simple, right? So what we need to do is we need to create an ecosystem that creates an environment where we actually have safe code, which I want to talk in a second, right? So here's the interesting thing about this, right? So for me, this is what it's all about, right? So basically, I think in the past, a lot of industries got away with it, right? They got away with it because you can solve something here, and you had a career. You had a career, you had a product, you actually, there's insane people who made a lot of money, a lot of great careers were built by solving a fringe of each of these, including AppSec, right? Including some of our careers, right, exist around that, right? At the time, your competitors, the competing products from here, were all marginally better, right? So they were 10%, 20% better, a little bit better, right? With GenAI, that's going to change. So here's the interesting thing, right? When these GenAI industries, right? When these industries go into GenAI, right? When they also, because remember, we're not the only industry, right, that is looking at GenAI, right? When they go into GenAI, basically, they will be able to do AppSec, right, better than AppSec, right? It's a bit like you go to Copiloting, or go to ChatGPT and go, hey, can you rewrite this code for me, right? And he's actually doing a better job than some of the application security professionals in the planet today, right? So, and if you think about it, right, you talk about, oh, I'm going to do source code analysis, right? Guess what? A great QA tool will be able to do that, right? You want to understand what which vulnerabilities to fix. A really good GenAI risk management tool will do that. You want to figure out how to fix things. The next gen project management is going to do that, right? Most of the things that we do, the next gen of this are going to do it, not because they want to, aim at AppSec. It's just because it's going to be one of the things they're going to do, right? And I think that there's a lot of companies, a lot of industries, they have no idea what's coming for them, right? Because in a way, when they GenAI the industry, they just are amazing at what they do. It's a bit like when everybody was working on all these models, all this stuff, and then ChatGPT came along and became better than them in one go. Not better than even a little bit, just better orders of magnitude, right? That's what's going to happen, right, in a lot of these industries. But here's the cool thing, right? So, in our world, right, and the AppSec world, is that I think we can do the same to those industries, right? I think that in a couple of years, right, or months, right, a lot of these GenAI AppSecs will be better than some of these, right? Because the question here is who's going to get there first, right? Because although, for example, think about it, if you take a good AppSec static analysis, code analysis tool that suddenly goes, oh, I'm going to create some tests. I'm going to create some unit tests, some integration tests. I'm going to actually feed some data from my, let's say, my feeds, my logs. I'm going to static analysis, dynamic analysis. I'm going to combine the whole thing, which I'll talk in a bit, right? You know what? We haven't just done an AppSec tool. We created probably the best QA tool that exists out there. Right? And guess what? The business doesn't have a QA tool at that level, right? So the interesting thing is that whoever comes up with a really amazing AppSec tool for code testing, will create at the same time one of the best QA tools that exists in the planet, right? The moment that we figure out how to fix vulnerabilities, right? And by the way, whenever you guys say, I have a vulnerability, it's easy to fix, that's bollocks, right? Finding who to fix is half the problem. Right? Finding who can fix it, who's going to pay for it, how you're going to schedule, getting on the backlog, who's going to project manage, how you're going to reward that. All of that needs to happen, right? Before you even fix anything. Take into account that you haven't even figured out what's the blast radius of that fix, right? So who solves that that's how, again, we felt security will be hitting a lot of other industries, right? Which is really cool. So here's the question, right? We're either going to become a commodity or we're going to be the one commoditized. Right? And the reason why I believe this is going to happen is because GenAI is a game changer, right? And I generally believe I was thinking about the analogy. It's a little bit like in another parallel universe, right? The internet haven't really occurred, right? Let's say AOL had one, right? Or Nokia had one, and it was all walled gardens, right? It was all this nice little, not very evolved. And then in one go, you had broadband, right? You had clouds. And then that just arrived, right? And you have cloud compute, you have the internet, the cloud compute, and broadband, right? In one go, right? Imagine that world. And then people went along, going like, it's kind of okay, but there's a lot of pictures of cats, right? On that thing, right? It's the same thing. Like the way I look at it is that GenAI is not about creating content. In fact, I think we need to look around it. The fact that it can create content is a side effect of how good it is, right? But GenAI is not about creating content. It happens to be crazy good at it because everything else it does. With GenAI, especially with ChatGPT, you can reason with it. You can have logic. You can apply conversations. I have debates now with ChatGPT that are some of the most insane conversations I ever had from a technical point of view, right? I am 10x more productive. I'm not being funny, right? The way I code now, in fact, I wrote an exploit recently. I was like, wow, this is freaking awesome, right? Because you're just that productive, right? And it's incredible. So, actually, I had the same slide of it, right? See, there was a world where, somebody won here, right? But, for the ones that be older, right, there was a time it could have been Nokia, right? It could have been the mobile. It could be the apps. It could be the social networks. Any of them could have, won that world, right? It just happened to be, in a way, was, actually iPhone, right? That really brought that together, right? So, and I actually asked ChatGPT about this, again, this is really cool, right? So look, I went to ChatGPT, and all I did was I copy and paste that and say, hey, any other companies to add? Think about the logic of that, right? These days, my conversation with ChatGPT is screenshot, screenshot, screenshot. On picture 1, I'll have this. On picture 2, I'm trying to do that. On picture 3, I have this problem. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? It's incredibly productive, right? It's really cool. And it's just a start, right? And then again, then I can go, okay, this is the coming before. What about this? So you can see the kind of dialogue. And this is just a very, very small example. Like on my LinkedIn, I have really other cool examples, right? So this means that we have an opportunity over the next months to really fulfill the AppSec destiny, right? I think some of us have been trying to do for 20 years, right? And here's an idea of what it is, right? I think our destiny, and OWASP, right, is to create a safe and trusted applications that are able to protect our assets, right? And assets is important, from malicious agents, actors, and events. And even events is interesting because sometimes most companies, the biggest attacker is actually the company itself, right? If you actually look at the biggest damage to the company was created, it was not an attacker, right? It's literally a bug, it's a problem, etc., right? But if they look at it, still affect everything else. So I think, I think that's where we want to go to, right? And here's my hypothesis, right? I think AppSec is uniquely positioned to drive this. Cybersecurity, AppSec too, because we are the only ones of the entire group that can speak with everybody. Right? If you work with a good team in a good environment, you should be probably one of the few entities in that entire organization that can actually have productive relationships with every single member of the organization across horizontal and vertical. Right? The cybersecurity team has access to everybody from the CEO all the way down to every level of the company, and is the only one that can literally speak across every single product team or business division without being involved in politics. Right? And we can get data from them. So it's an insanely position to be to drive business value, right? So I think we have the hypothesis, right? So let's talk a little bit about GenAI, right? And by the way, I've been doing some thinking. You can read about this. These presentations I've done, right? It actually is quite interesting because it goes all the way from my graph days and then worldly maps. And if you don't know what that is, you really need to, right? And then I kind of will evolve, and eventually I go into this kind of GenAI things, this kind of world of becoming more productive, right? And all this is online, right? And by the way, this is actually a really cool presentation I did when I was applying for a job, right? A while back. So it's a big deal, and you focus it. I'm going to fly through this because actually this is, I think the previous part was fast. Okay, so basically, GenAI is not a silver bullet. Anybody wants to buy a silver bullet? I have a bridge to sell you, right? There's actually the interesting phase now. There's a lot of people who are saying no about this, and I think it was Mark Curfew, the first guy I heard saying this, right? It's like it's very difficult for actually a person, right, to understand something when the salary depends on their understanding. So a lot of people will look at this and going, oh, it sucks because he's doing spelling mistakes, right? But and it's interesting because I see a lot of very clever individuals and very clever companies completely missing the point, right, of what GenAI can actually do for them, right? So there's only 2 technologies in the last 2 years that really impressed me, right? The first was worldly maps. Again, so saying again, if you don't know what this is, you're missing the biggest thing. Until GenAI came, and now I think it's a little bit better than worldly maps. But worldly maps, in fact, I did a post recently that says it really gave me a lot of zen. Worldly maps, because for the first time I understood how things happen. I understood why they happen. I understood why I was not understood, but also I really understood how to create really good environments, right? And again, if this is the first time you've seen this, you're missing a massive thing. So there's a lot of presentations. See Simon Worley's presentation, right? It's incredible, right? Again, here's a map of security. In fact, here's the thing, right? So this is kind of how maps goes, right? Before security LLMs were there, right? No, actually, sorry. Before, this dot was here, right? And this is the evolution: Genesis, custom build, product, and commodity, right? What happened when ChatGPT came along? It took a dot from there and put it here, right? And then what's happening is this is all moving there, right? Very fast. And if you are in this space, you really need to rethink, right? Because that now is a massive change, right? And this is a great way to understand how everything fits, everything works. Again, I think like this, right, in maps. And again, if you want to think, by the way, the Open Security Summit again has a lot of good stuff on it, some great presentations. And this is one of the things that, again, if you understand this concept, which is innovate, leverage, and commoditize, you understand a lot about how the great companies evolve, especially how Amazon does. And fundamentally what it is you basically commoditize something, then you let your ecosystem innovate, then you harvest it, and then you commoditize that bit, and then you rinse and repeat. And this is exactly what Amazon has been doing, like to a T, right? And it works crazy, effectively. So, right? So everybody will be impacted, but a lot of people are excited, a lot of ignoring, some panicking, right? One of the reasons why I think GenAI is a little bit different than in the past was because some of the companies that panicked 2 years ago were these companies, right? Where in the past, a lot of the biggest companies in the world ignored. They ignored the internet, they ignored the mobile phone, they ignored the cloud, but this didn't, right? They realize, the opportunity and the threat to their business. So they're investing crazily, right? And actually I asked ChatGPT to help me with this one. But here's the thing, right? You can argue that, the iPhone, when they come along, this comes with a way better position, right? Again, the cloud, mobile, right? Others, right? A lot of these companies, they saw a change. They're going, yeah, it's all right. We don't have to worry about it. And you know what happened to them, right? And by the way, it's not about the Terminator, right? This might be an issue, but it's not for us to deal with this, right? And also, yes, stupid people will do stupid things, right? So So that's okay, right? That's always going to happen. That's the thing, right? And this is the image, right? Yes, Sam's, little message was interesting. That got my curiosity. This was the image where I was like, this is not a code prediction freaking thing, right? When I saw this image, and let me explain what it is, right? This is actually from Adobe Firefly, right? That in the middle is the original image, right? That is the expansion. In fact, is one of the thousands, the millions of variations that, in this case, Firefly or ChatGPT or DALL-E can create. Not DALL-E, but that particular generative AI can do. That for me was the moment like, whoa, the level of in basic understanding, the level of context that somebody would need to create that is off the charts, right? And then here's other variations, right? Like the Mona Lisa, Nirvana, Adele, Metallica, and you can see you go, hey, can you add a shark to it? Can you take a shark out? Can you make a Metallica, a Master of Puppets, fun with cake, without cake, whatever, right? But you have to understand that the cost of changing something here is enormous, right? The cost of changing something here is 0.1 cents, right? That changes the whole lot. And this was the moment I started to think in terms of text. Now, the crazy thing from a security point of view, and if anybody knows different, I would love to have a conversation, is that we still don't know how this happens, right? And that's very important, right? We still don't know exactly how it happens. So my clear understanding is that there's a whole bunch of layers. The bottom layers are like syntax, let's say in text, right? Syntax, text, grammar, all that jazz. And by the time you get to the 10 of 1,000 layers, you have, structure, humor, all sorts of meta languages, right? There's a really cool theory that says that ChatGPT discovered actually how we think in a way, how we generate content in our heads, but there's no theory to prove that today. Now, think about that when I mentioned putting ChatGPT in line or LLM in line, that we don't understand how the hell this thing happens, right? So the idea that there's not going to be some crazy, ridiculous vulnerabilities is basically not thinking that, I was trying to find a screenshot from 30 years ago where somebody, I think it was from Microsoft, that had a screenshot of a function in Windows that was called save copy, which was literally a string copy. And all it had was an exception, right? At the time, that was our understanding of safe, right? Oh, we try and catch, right? And that's the craziest definition of a buffer overflow, right? So, we still don't understand it. So here's the thing, right? If you do this, input, intermediate representation, and output, because that's kind of what happens, right? You have GenAI takes this, creates an intermediate representation, and gives you the output, right? What I think is very dangerous, especially from a security point of view, is to do this, right? And I just want to say very clear, if you or anybody that you guys involved are putting an LLM in line with potential malicious traffic, you're in for a crazy surprise in the next 6 to 12 months. And if you want to get into pen testing and hacking, this is like a field day, right? This is 2001 all over again on web apps world, right? I think we're going to see some ridiculous exploits on GenAI, on the models, on the poisoning, getting data out of it, etc. In fact, I would argue that you have to assume that every piece of data that exists on an LLM is publicly available to whoever talks to it. Like literally, I would start there, right? If you have any other assumption, you are at a massive risk, which is why I don't think the game is on customizing models. It's about prompts, because there you can control what gets fed in. It's about read-only models, for example, right? Which I think is super key. So the other part here is, this is how you want to think about this. Is the input, intermediate representation, proposed solution, human GenAI verification. And I think that's key. Right? I think it's key that you have a human in a loop. This is about human augmentation, right? It's not about human replacement, right? That's how we should be thinking about it, is this human ownership. And the thing I have here, pull request, which is, I was going to zoom in. And by the way, my slides get worse the more I go in, right? Because I was running out of time. So, but I think there's one massive concept here is everything that we do with an LLM needs to have a Git diff, needs to be stored, needs to have a history record of everything that happens, right? Again, that's how we're going to scale, right? So basically, the model is don't do that at the top. Input GenAI user output. Again, if you want to hack and found stuff, focus here, right? Because that field is crazy, but actually have something like that, right? Have that human ownership, have that feedback loop built into the system, right? Which is very powerful, right? So again, right, human answers, so feedback loops. I'm just going to skip to this. This is a great presentation, by the way. Trevor Noah talks about the bias, the fact that at least with GenAI we can deal with the bias, right? And the other thing is, by the way, I'm a massive fan of trigger incidents, right? I think running P3s as P1s is great to get stuff done, but also we should then have incidents every time the GenAI misbehaves in a way that we're not supposed to. Then we fix it, and then it goes back to thing. Now, let's quickly talk about GenAI security, right? I think I mentioned this, right? To say it again, don't put LLMs or GenAI in line, right? I think that's crazy dangerous, right, on this, right? And your LLMs should be read-only. They should not be able to modify them, because there's some already crazy hacks where people that, for example, poison a model, and then they can't unpoison it, right? And then, think about it. How do you do data erasures, right, in a model? So if we don't even understand how the hell that data is actually put in the first place, right? So my view here is that we want models that are basically locked, and this is where I think AWS had a really cool thing with the concept of foundation models, right? Because it's about having lots of different models, and you find the best model. In fact, the best model is code. Right? That's the interesting thing, right? The best model is actually what is the minimum amount of code, which is actually deterministic to do the same thing. And I actually think there's going to be an interesting research on using the LLMs to find the exact code. So you get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, in a way, AI models. They become more and more and more predictable, right, as we go along, right? So the other one is, and this is the crazy thing, right? This is where I think we're going to see some insane exploits, is, so you already have an LLM that we don't know how it works, right? And we're going to assume that people will be able to control, attackers will be able to control that. So what you're going to do is going to connect that to an API that's going to be connections to other systems, right? That is going to fly really well, right? This is the same thing as when people were connecting APIs to web services, and you exploit the web servers, and something, I think once we got told to stop a pen test because somebody told us that we were hacking at the company. Right? I was like, how did that happen? It's like, yeah, because the system that you just got hit was connected to this system, and now had a direct line to this other company who's like, oh, hold on, why is these guys attacking us, right? So this is going to, again, spectacular. Again, if you on the defense side, don't do this. If you're on the attack side, go after this, right? And again, if you're in hacking and pen testing, have a field day, right? This is going to be massive, right? Which is why you want read-only models. You want models that have no content, and you want models that basically are highly predictable, right? And that's why when I start my research, and you can actually see a post of me going to Portugal with like 30 books, right? I actually drove so my wife couldn't complain on the side of the books. And I literally took 30 books, because when I got into this, I bought a book of every area. And I thought that my research was going to be about the model. So I started reading, I started geeking on it, and I was like, fuck, this is complex, right? And I got into it. I still remember thinking that it's complex, but it's not as complex as the maths I was doing in university. So still think that was a bit over the top. But the more I got into it, I thought it was like the prompt here and the model there, right? And the more I got into it, I realized, actually, no. The models are the commodity. The models actually want to be predictable, right? What we want is prompts. And then as the prompt size grew, I was like, yeah, that's the name of the game, right? And at that time, it was like 2,000 characters. Now it's like, 200,000. I think Google's just said 1 million, right? Like now, once the context windows get to a certain size, that's the name of the game. Then it's a cost issue, not a model issue, right? So this is the bit where I think is going to be a massive change, right? And I need to do a presentation just on this, right? So I want to imagine this world, right? In the past, every change that somebody wanted to do in security, in the business, was code, right? Every new feature, every bug was code that you need to change, right? We want to get to a world where a lot of that logic is in prompts. Right? So when the business wants a new feature, when you want a behavior change, you modify your prompt. And the prompts can be happening in real time. You can have all sorts of things to validate the prompts. You can have models on top of models. But the speed of development is going to be crazy. And this is what I think is a game changer. And this is where I think in AppSec, we want to get to the mode where a lot of the stuff that we do is around this business logic layer, which in the past was missing. Right? In the past, if I wanted to integrate a SAS result with a DAS result with the source code, how the fuck are you going to do that, right? And that's why there's all industries that had to solve that, and they haven't. But now I can take that result, even the most untrackable XML freaking report that is produced, right? From these two different tools, I can give it the source code and go, hey, ChatGPT, can you connect the dots? And you will, right? It doesn't mean it's not perfect yet, but imagine when you even clean up the code a bit more, right? So and that's the other thing here, right? If you're building a GenAI tool or adding GenAI to a product, right? First of all, you need to understand worldly maps. If you haven't done a worldly map, you actually have to do a worldly map. Have I mentioned you have to do a worldly map, right? Because you don't bet against OpenAI, AWS, Google, Microsoft, right? If you're doing anything that is on their roadmap, all you have is a little advantage, right? And for example, when Sam mentioned, like, yes, in my generation, you could develop a SaaS engine and milk it, right, for 10 years. Not that we did it, but a lot of companies did it, right? And we had a crazy amount of industry that was ridiculously inefficient because none of them freaking open sourced the thing, right? So now that's not possible. Right? Your little advantage is literally going to be destroyed by this next generation of these tools. So again, what you want to do is you want to commoditize this crowd, right? You want to leverage them, right? Not bet against them. If you do, well, it's going to happen. So I was trying to find a better word for this. So I was trying to find I was almost called the black and white AppSec, because that's what my kids say. Anything before they remember is the black and white days. My kids were like, so which apps you had at school, right? Just to see how off they are, right? Like the idea of a non-internet, a non-mobile world, right? So that's the black and white days. I kind of call the analog AppSec, right? So, and by the way, in that world, I created this thing called the O2 platform, which, Sam actually mentioned. And I think I saw and code the future, but it was crazy. By the way, this is a crazy research project. On the other hand, open source everything you do because you still have it available 15 years later, right? It's really cool, right? And you can read about it. And to be honest, there's still insane technology here. If you guys want to pick it up, there's stuff in here that even today the tools are not doing, right? And I can't believe I'm going to play a video from 2011, right? And this was me going to the industry, well, come on, please innovate. Here's the freaking ideas, right? I'm going to do something else now because I want to become a CISO, right? But hey, take this on, right? So this, right? It's a real-time vulnerability creation feedback inside Visual Studio, right? Here is the developer coding, happy and nicely, right? A web page. It comes in. You can see there's real-time compilation and there's real-time security analysis, right? SAS analysis. This is, by the way, this is using cat.net, which is a great project that actually Mark Curfew picked up and then got killed in the mix of a bunch of other things. But okay, so you got the app, you got hello request, you could see taint on name, it goes in here, and as soon as, you can see it's fine because it's a static stream, as soon as you connect the dots, immediately feedback, right? Immediately feedback on the UI, cool, hey, you have a vulnerability, right? So if I come in here and I put a static string, hey, I fixed it. Now these days I would add these to tests, but you can see the cool, right? So when I put a safe string, I put HTML encode, name, there you go, right? In fact, it's still there because I haven't connected the thing, right? So it's a good example. I see it's still vulnerable because I hadn't connected the name of the variable, right? So now let's look at some SQL injection, right? So, but the cool thing about this is a real-time feedback loop in the browser, right? These days you freaking figure an LLM on top of this, and you have context, all sorts of lovely things, right? But again, this is not that hard to do, right? So yes, this is what you can do with what's it called, the O2 platform at the time. So yeah, pretty cool thing, right? So yeah, you can see then he goes into this, and then he goes into file injection. So yeah, it's not there. It's actually a OWASP project. My fault, I didn't maintain it. So if anybody wants to help, off you go, right? It's open source, right? It needs a bit of love, right? It used to be there, it's not there anymore, right? It's actually my fault, right? I just didn't have the time, right? Because actually, to be honest, this was written in .NET, and I kind of moved away from .NET, so that doesn't help. I did another cool project we should check out. This actually is maintained, and actually was open source, I think with Sam, because I did a cool bot, and Sam was like, dude, open source. Like, actually, that's a good idea. So I open sourced it, and it's cool because I open sourced it because I was able to keep it from 3 companies already, and I keep evolving it. So it's really cool, right? And by now I arrive with all these technologies, so nobody's going to complain. So it's really cool. You can actually see my history here. You see Kubernetes. You can see Graph, Elastic, Jupyter, Datadog, G Suite, LLMs, AWS, utils. These are all Python APIs, by the way. And these all APIs make it super easy, right, to script. So I'll give you an example. I can code in AWS Lambdas in real time. I can be coding, I make a code change, I run a test, I deploy, publish, test, execute a Lambda function in about 3 seconds, right? The productivity gain that you have with that is insane, right? So this is kind of it, right? You think bot free is cool? Should check this API, right? Again, needs a lot of love. If you want open source projects to maintain, hey, off you go, right? You get jobs out of this, by the way, because that's a great place to hire. So, by the way, I think our industry is part of the problem, right? It's like, if as a CISO, this is what it looks like, bloody hell, right? So fucking broken, right? And look at OWASP, right? It's like, yay, cool, yeah, where do I start, right? So, we really need, again, LLMs are great to start to understand this, right? Give me context, talk about this, right? That's the thing. So, one interesting question is, in AppSec is who's paying for it, right? And if the security team is paying for it, something is wrong already. Because everything we do should add value to tech, IT development, and ideally should be the business who's paying for it. So we already know our industry is broken because most of us get paid by security, right? And it shouldn't be. It should be the business because we should be adding business value. Again, we should be telling the business how the thing works, right? And that's, again, we are at that epicenter, right, of everything, right? So what I like about this is about safety and trust. So the first thing I also say as a CISO, first time I meet the board and the execs, I always say, because they will ask, hey, are we safe now, right? Are we secure? I says, no, dude. My job is not to not have incidents. My job is to prevent crisis. In fact, I'm going to generate lots of incidents, right? Because I really like to run P3s, IP1s. But I think it's very important that it's about the resilience of the system, right? It's not about security. You know, it doesn't matter if you have a crazy vulnerability here, right? Because if you have a crazy vulnerability here and there's no assets there, who the fuck cares? Right? What matters is there's this middle level vulnerability here, which is connected to that, which connects to the internet, is connected to an attacker that might actually exploit you, not that science fiction attacker that you think is really cool, but it's never actually exploiting you, and is not going after your company. So, okay, yes, it's exploitable, but who has done it, right? Where here, that's a problem, right? So, I think we're a great industry. I think we actually know how to write. There's a lot of, you know, I know Daniel, what's the theme of your presentation? But I think we actually know how to deploy, maintain, and run secure apps, right? I think we have 20 years ago, I don't think we knew how to do that, right? I think now, given enough money, resources, we can protect apps, right? And you could see that. There's apps in the world that survive the most sophisticated advanced attackers in the planet, right? And they don't get compromised left, right, and center, right? So we know how to do this. Our problem is scale. Right? Because in a way, I think a lot of this is, what is the app in AppSec? Is it the code, the web server, the container, the Kubernetes host, the SIEM, the cloud, etc.? Here's the cool thing, right? It's actually all of them, right? And so we need to think about the app has everything. And the coolest thing on AppSec is actually, we actually have a lot of things to teach to a lot of this crowd, right? Because if you talk to the container crowd, the Kubernetes, the stuff, they don't even do testing, right? They go, oh, I don't need testing. My CloudFormation is declarative. It's like, so is the code, right? But we still test the freaking thing, right? So if you look at the maturity of AppSec as an industry, we actually are really good. We need SaaS, we need DaaS, we need all of those technologies for everything. So you need to start thinking as the app has the whole lot, right, of this. So finally, right, I think if you're an experienced AppSec professional, it's a great time to be involved. If you're a novice or student, it's a great time to be involved, right? If you have imposter syndrome, it's a great time to be involved, right? And whatever you are, it's a great time to be involved. In fact, one of the things I always try to do is that I try to bring talent outside of security to security, right? I had some great successes, right? And I'm a big fan of hiring, doctors and nurses and bartenders, right? And anybody who's passionate about, and they're really good in their professional because they have an ability to learn and desire for it. And actually, a lot of times we talk about imposter syndrome. There's a lot of amazing talent that has trespasser syndrome, so they don't think they should even be there. I think in a weird way, with the new reset of GenAI, it's a bit like being back in AppSec 20 years ago, right? Sometimes you look at some industries, you go, oh, yeah, I missed the boat, right? It was there. I could have done it if I was there at the time. Well, guess what? In AppSec, with GenAI, we're back where we started, right? So it's really cool, right? So again, we can do a lot of stuff. And now, I'm not going to go to this because I ran out of time, but also my slides are not very good by now. But I'm just going to give a quick thing. I think on threat modeling is going to be insane because finally we can actually freaking create architecture diagrams of the code programmatically. We can actually map. And again, a threat modeling tool done to a great degree will basically be used by the business everywhere. Because if you go to any team and go, hey, do you want to know how your code actually works? They go, yeah, let me know when you find it, right? Do you like an architecture diagram that's up to date and changed, right? We'd like to see a delta of the things, right? And by the way, threat modeling is just a social engineer way of getting the business to give you an architectural diagram, how it works, right? And to think about vulnerabilities, right? That's fundamentally what it is, right? But I think it's going to be insane here. I think learning and mentoring is going to be massive, right? The bots, I think the biggest, again, one of the biggest change that the LLMs will bring is learning. Again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, ask ChatGPT to teach you something. It's incredible, right? I can learn so much more efficient now because I can question, and I think we're going to be able to create amazing learning paths for people that had no idea about a topic and to another topic here. Actually, Mavy's not here, is she? Yeah. But I actually had a great example, right, of how this works. May, by the way, is a great success. She came and joined one of the teams I had as a work experience. Actually, she took holidays, right? She did 2 weeks with us work experience. We love her so much. We hired her as a junior. Now I think she's hired as an AppSec DevOps specialist, right? Amazing. But I had a session with her where she was once doing a threat modeling, and she was pretty young, right? Like you could see that she's the kind of person that any hardened developer would just destroy, right? You know that, sometimes they go, I have no time for you. You don't even know what a code commit is. I'm gonna like destroy you, right? But the reporter when they have like the earpiece, right? Actually, I think it was on Slack, but I was listening to it. So I started feeding her questions, right, about the system, and you should see how the temperature changed in the room, right? And she was just acting like one of those reporters, like, so, what about the architecture of this, and what about this, and what about that? It was great, but also show me that if you take somebody that is really clever and specialist, right, and give it, for example, something like ChatGPT, they can learn so much more. Because maybe they don't know what SSH was, but now they can learn. And they can say, explain to me what SSH or SQL injection is for a doctor. And they can do it. So I think learning is going to be massive. And I think our kids need to really learn how to use this thing. Again, security champions in learning. Again, this thing, finally they can talk to each other. They can have context. They can make sense of all this. I think secure coding is going to be finally massive because we can have context. We can understand what we're doing. And the other thing that's really cool about this is we're finally going to be able to know which builds to block and which builds not to block. Because if you work in an environment where it's shipping every day, you can't review everything, right? But finally, we're going to be able to have context on the stuff that's happening. Infrastructure cloud, we're going to finally understand what the hell is running in our cloud environments. And then the WAPs, again, going to Ivan's thing. I think we can finally be able to connect and intersect and have real-time connections to this. And then one of the things, again, software development lifecycle to scale, pen testing is going to be really cool. And by the way, we are a bit on a time frame here, right? Because the attackers are improving, right? They're not there yet, right? And then again, if you've done this for any long time, there's a moment where you have this existential question, which is, why haven't others found this before, right? Or why am I the first one here, right? And sometimes it's literally that there was no attacker with a business model to be there, right? But that's going to change because the scale and the ability, and again, they're going to be using the same techniques, right? But again, we need to be better at this, and observability, and incident response. And this is one of the things, and there's a great OWASP project, I think, called Proactive Security, right? This is one of those things where, again, we saw the future, and it was like, yeah, but we can't get there, right? But the idea here is that our apps should react to the environment, right? Our apps should understand if they're under attack, under resource. They should respond to what's happening, right? In a much more profound way. And again, with LLMs, we can have that context to really make that possible. So again, an area that is super exciting, right? And then, actually, I'm not going to go through this, but one more thing. By the way, this is my research project. I'll be doing the cyber boardroom. You can personalize it. You can talk to a bot, blah, blah, blah. You can say, I can personalize it. So actually, I ask it to be funny. So if I get what's door, it tells me, well, not the Explorer, but this. And the thing about this you want to understand is that if you play with Athena, this is all that is needed to create a bot that is actually quite effective, right? All you have to do is give a prompt that you're helpful, blah, 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 you this, you this, you that, and you have a crazy prompt. And here's a really funny thing, right? I actually think, right, that sometimes we take ourselves very seriously, right? So I went to Athena and I changed it. I said, hey, by the way, so I actually changed the system prompt, right? I say, maybe you call it Camões, that's a Portuguese guy, right? That we all study but nobody understood. It's a bit like Shakespeare, right? And but I said, can you be highly sarcastic and jaded about cybersecurity, right? So then when I said, hey, should I care about cybersecurity? I love this line, right? Hey, welcome back to the thrilling episode of Let's Try Not to Get Hacked Today, right? And then supported by you, hey, why should you care about cybersecurity? So I think this is really cool, right? I like the fact that finally, right, we can create customized messages for every single stakeholder that we have, right? I remember once asking my team to create 10 versions of report, and they freaked out. And we already have graphs on this, right? And we have Jira automation. But in my head, I was like, shit, I want 200 versions of this report because I need one per person, per target, per environment. So if you think about execs and board members or even team members, you need to create a version for them of what you have, which is customized to them, their personality, their language, their context, what they know, what they care about, how they think about, etc. Now we can, right? And that's the crazy power. And you can even make it funny or not funny, right? You can say, that person has no sense of humor, just give me bullet points, right? Give me one paragraph, give me one word, whatever, right? It's really cool. So, and again, read that. There's tons of stuff in there. And thank you. A little bit of a time. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Dinis. Before you go, because obviously we will have time for questions after Daniel's talk, and stick around because we're also going to have a quiz. There are some awesome prizes to win if you know answers to questions about OWASP. There was one question submitted, and that was ChatGPT or BART?
I think at the moment, like, well, I have more experience with ChatGPT. I think ChatGPT, until that little hiccup that happened, you know, last year, right? I think ChatGPT is giving a masterclass on how to execute. Like literally, it's a masterclass. The way they're bringing features, the way they're introducing things, the pace they're doing, the way they're scaling, the priorities. You think is easy. I work in big companies. To be able to pull that off with that execution, and the only other company I saw doing that was AWS, right? They're giving a massive masterclass. So for me, I think, you know, the UI that I like, that I use every day is ChatGPT. I think Google is catching up, right? And I think with Gemini, there's a lot of great stuff, right? You know, again, I guess I should realize where I am. And again, don't bet against Google, right? In fact, to be honest, I think ChatGPT did a great favor to Google, right? Because every time Google came out with a new GenAI stuff, their stock price will go down, right? Because there will be somebody making mistakes. So in a way, ChatGPT allowed Google, right, to really jump a couple of generations, right? Because suddenly they could bring their own stuff. Where before, you remember that every time Google would talk about, AI, the stock price will go down because somebody found a hallucination, right? So, but yeah, no, again, don't bet against Google, right? Like Google is like, like the AI stuff they have, it's pretty incredible, right? So yeah, but I think at the moment, I think ChatGPT in the environment, in the functionality, in the multi-model, I think has a little bit of an edge on it.
Excellent, thank you, Dinis. Right.
I think that's questions in the end, right?
Yeah. So let's see if we can stress Daniel. So Daniel is an absolute legend in our industry, not just because he started our OWASP London chapter 20 years ago and got Dinis and Avan together in a pub, and they all had some drinks and they talked about interesting stuff. And Dan talked about something called OWASP testing phase. And one of the interesting things that I want to ask you about this, how many people in the room know what OWASP ASVS is? Raise your hands. Okay. So there was a tweet that I just saw on Daniel's timeline, that there was apparently a story that Daniel was out there for a job interview, and apparently the interviewer was giving him a really hard time, and without knowing who he is, and was trying to convince him about ASVS, and that Dan knows nothing about it. And
he said I didn't know anything about AppSec.
No, about AppSec, which is interesting. Yes, and I saw someone on Twitter said, okay, did the guy actually manage to go to Google and tweet, who is the author of OWASP ASVS? And that's, of course, Daniel. And he's done a lot of great research over the past year. So obviously we are thankful to him, not just because of ASVS. There are quite a lot of other OWASP projects where we had some fantastic contributions. Currently, Daniel's at Santander, heading up the cybersecurity research, doing some cool stuff with malware analysis and some nation-state attackers. But because he started it all and he's one of pioneers of the industry, it's great to hear that he decided to present a talk about 20 years of AppSec. Have we solved all the problems? Let's all welcome Daniel.
Thank you. Let's see if this works. This is where technology fails. Firstly, thank you very much for coming. It's quite humbling to see how many people came and how many people on the waiting list. And also a massive thanks to Google for doing this. When we did the first OWASP London, it was the very early days of OWASP. And the industry was really young and immature. Not much has changed. Ivan said, if we got a few people in the room, that was a massive, massive thing. To see everybody here now, it is very humbling because this is still quite a small industry. And I thought, I've been quite privileged in my career because I've been heavily involved in the offensive scene in the 90s and then morphed into this thing called the World Wide Web and application security. And I've seen a lot of change, and I've seen a lot of things that haven't changed. And part of that is OWASP. And I asked today on Twitter, one of the hardest things of when we started OWASP was, do people actually use it? Do people benefit from it? And I asked that, and we got some really good responses. Victoria said, she basically moved to Switzerland, and one of the key things was how, it helped the community. Luca, who's a crazy Italian hacker, he's really damn good at doing malicious things, said that OWASP was the AppSec pillar of our times. And this was really cool because like you genuinely don't know. And that's the biggest problem with open source. You put your blood and sweat into something and is anybody using it? Does everybody really give a shit? Simon, you might know him, Zap Proxy. Zap Proxy getting accepted as a project helped me break into AppSec. Like who here uses Zap? Like that's phenomenal. Like Mark itself found a really cool story about people in Romania after the brutal regime and how they, used OWASP to get inspiration and that kind of stuff. And then the one that blew me away, this man single-handedly has carried application security research for the last 5 years. James Kettle is my hero. I sit on the Black Hat review board and we have an AppSec track and it's a lonely place. Because that part of you thinks, well, you've solved application security, right? There's no real new research coming out. Thank God for this man. Because when he does stuff, he breaks the web. And like he said there, my first ever conference presentation was at AppSec EU, and that get me hired at Port Swigger. So like building a community has been incredibly rewarding. I can't see my slides here or anything. Technology is awful. I'm going to step back. So like I said, in the 90s, I was doing a lot of networking style hacking as you did. And I was helping build the Financial Times FT.com was during the first .com, and that really starts to age me now. And these things called web applications were going online. And then Jeff came up with this really cool paper that kind of literally changed an entire industry. And the quote was, well, what's the problem, right? A Microsoft SQL Server allows batch commands. Yeah. Is it exploitable? That was 1998. His name was Rainforest Puppy. We still have SQL injection. And what was interesting is if you look at the early web, it was kind of a bit like young lovers in the dark. We were fumbling and putting fingers in all places. We didn't really know what we were doing, but we were doing stuff. So this one is Apache Scalp. It was a lovely bug found and made malicious by Gobbles, who were a really cool hacking crew at the time who didn't like the security industry. And IBM's X-Force, the experts at the time, said, it is not exploitable. Gobbles said, is it? And released that code, and that became a massive worm. And it was a good foray into understanding how these experts were saying, we know the vulnerabilities, don't worry about it, it's not exploitable. We still hear that today. On the right is a tool written by a friend of mine, Rulof, who founded a company called SensePost that I used to run. That was a tool used to exploit IIS. This was pre the days of understanding the burden of releasing malicious tools on the internet. We were young, dumb, and full of enthusiasm. And well, to be fair, we were breaking into everything, right? So that's what you did in the 90s, because there was no law enforcement. They were still catching proper bank robbers. Then kind of something happened. Mark, on September 24th, 2001, on the Web AppSec mailing list, at the time, the mailing list was really interesting. It was basically people talking about web applications and vulnerabilities, and it was very early days. And he said, you know what? I'm going to start this thing called the Open Web Application Security Project. And I think it's really important, it's really cool. And it really was, because literally 2 years later, Bill Gates came out with the Trustworthy Memo, and basically where he said, hey, everybody's been kicking us quite a bit, rightly so. SQL Server 2000 was not the best idea. We kind of need to be responsible in how we build products, because people are now using our products to do things online, and not just nerdy things anymore. Buying stuff, going onto websites to book movie tickets and such. And as such, they should be built in a way that makes them trustworthy. That was 2002. But what was interesting is that right at the start then, there are a few of us who were all still fairly new in the application space. And this is kind of the early days of OWASP. Some really cool names here. And by the way, if you ever noticed that OpenAI has an outage, it's because Dinis Cruz is talking to the bot. He hasn't changed, and I love him for that. These are the kind of people that were all exploring a lot of the stuff that we were doing at the time to say, right, how do we do this? How do we build stuff? And Mark and I were looking at these applications coming out. Like I said, I was working at Financial Times. I moved from networking exploitation to these web applications. And I've told the story before. We were building this front end. They used Lotus Notes. Like, oh my God. Probably one of the worst pieces of software designed by a blind person. But they used Lotus Notes to publish the web application to the web. What the fuck? I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. That's hardcore stuff. And then there was this database called Oracle, and it was unbreakable. And at the time, we had these firewalls from a company called Checkpoint, and they said we can stop web application attacks because we stop all the ports from being hit. I'm like, port 80 is open. We didn't have 443 back then. Port 80 is open, right? The attacks are, okay, ignore me. And we were messing around, and I was throwing garbage at the application. I was getting these ORA errors back. I was like, that's really weird. Why is the database talking to the front end? That's like just wild. This was pre-RFP's research. And it was because basically we were doing injection. We just didn't really know. So Mark and I were like, okay, let's build a book that's open source to teach people how to do web application testing. And that was the foundations of the OWASP testing guide. Work started in 2002. I'm only 23 years old, so I was quite young at the time. And we were like, okay, well, how do people go about testing these web applications that people are building? These applications written in Perl, CGI scripts, really bad insecure languages, or the languages I like to think of as most security application vendors today still use. Ivanti, Fortinet, all these other ones. I didn't do that. Oh, okay. So I thought about it like as a history. We've gone through a lot of revolutions. Now, the first revolution is there was a library called Whisker. Anybody here remember or use Whisker? One person, thank God. It was written by Rainforest Puppy, and it was used to start interacting with applications in a way. And it was really important because for me, this was the foundation of web application testing tools. Out of Whisker came Achilles. Achilles was the first web application specific proxy that allowed you to sit in between the browser and manipulate things. And that was really important. The interface was incredibly basic. You could still manipulate your stuff. You could do your little damage and send it on. Then came Exodus, written by a very good friend of mine, Rogan, who we worked together. Exodus was basically Rogan's foray into learning how to do Java, which is a weird language, right? Because anybody here a Java developer? Odd people. But we love you, but it's a strange language. So like to build a proxy in Java, you think, Rogan, dude, you need to get a girlfriend, babe. But it worked because now all of a sudden we could start stacking up the application requests. And we could start to understand how these applications are being built. Bear in mind, it was CGI scripts and Perl scripts and everything else. And that was amazing because when we started to build these first level, sorry, I'm still recovering from pneumonia, these applications, it was a mess, right? At the time, DoubleClick was coming about with internet advertising. So you had these things all over the top, and they were calling, like Dinis said, different boxes somewhere, an Oracle box over here that was firewalled off. And you had to really understand how to break stuff. And at the time, development wasn't really where it was today. It was still unicorn dev, right? You went from system requirements all the way through to operations, and kind of there, right, security testing happened. Now, at the time, I wasn't hired as a penetration tester. That industry didn't exist when we were doing it. My job was a sort of system administrator, building PSINet and the early internet that we had around here, and then for Financial Times. But my main thing was, can you annoy the shit out of the developers? And that's why I kind of fitted into here, right, like this operation thing. So I was like, okay, I need to learn how to build applications, and that was a wild time. And what came out of it was the second revolution. So now we had the tools, right? We sort of had the knowledge because we were writing the testing guide and the project. We were also doing very stupid things. On the left is a website called hack.coza. I left the UK when I was 10, moved to South Africa. Govboy and myself and a few others, we had this website where we used to share exploit code to other people. And we used to give bugs away for free because we were bad business people. So you would find a vulnerability, you'd write your exploit code, you would use it on the internet, you get bored, you share it with other groups, TISO, woo-woo, whatever, and then you put it onto the website and then other people could use it. Zero responsibility, right? Because bad people use bad things with bad stuff like that. But looking back, it was a different time. But we were teaching people how to break applications, how to test things, how to do pen testing. And that was really important because the testing guide for me was my first foray into really understanding the power of the community and how we could really change people's mindsets and lives. And we had lots of people coming to us afterwards and saying, I changed careers because of the testing guide. Anybody here ever read the testing guide or used the testing guide? So a handful of people, which is quite cool, right? And that's grown on to these really big things. It's at version 5 now and it's doing an amazing job. But what came out of it was we finally had a big change in how businesses saw security. This lady on the left is a very good friend of mine, Justine Bone. She is a badass hacker. Like genuinely, at the time when she was working with IBM X-Force, with people like Dave Aitel, who just left the NSA, her sole responsibility was an application security team where her team of 4 or 5 people, this was 2004, 5-ish, basically were responsible for looking at the commits that were going into the repo. Oh, magic, thank you. And looking at security bugs. And in 2004 or 5, that was quite unheard of because one, there was somebody responsible for application security, which had never really been talked about before. And also companies were starting to go, maybe we need to start thinking about this. And then we had the third revolution, right? And this is where it gained traction. And like I said, I've been involved in Black Hat, God, another 20 years, Jesus Christ. We first had a Black Hat application-specific paper in 2003, right? And it was very much the early days. And then in 2006, we had the next one. So it took 3 years before we started to see people actively researching applications. And they were looking at beyond the normal stack of the web servers and so on. They were looking at application frameworks and how people were doing stuff. And that was really important because that, for me, kickstarted a massive amount of research that we saw after that. What came out of that was a hell of a lot of tools. There was a lot of strange things like Real Player, which was, we can thank the porn industry for web streaming, if we can be brutally honest. But Burp Suite came out, and that was version 1. And for the first time, we had something that had a proxy. Well, we had that with Achilles and Exodus and Paros and all that kind of stuff. But we had a thing called a spider, where we could now automate scraping of the website to build up an attack tree, really important. We had a thing called an intruder. We're like, ooh, we have tools now. We can now fuzz stuff, right? And then we had repeater. Burp itself commoditized application testing, where now you had teams be able to use a tool, understand how applications work, because we had books written about it, we had talks written about it, and now we saw a massive industry start to come up. And that was really cool, because we were like, wow, this thing's growing really heavily. And then we saw the rise of DevOps. At the first, you had the antiquated technology called Jenkins. Nobody here uses Jenkins still, right? But it was the telephone. It was the old analog telephone. Yeah, that's Jenkins. And it was great because all of a sudden we saw how you could put stuff in your pipeline and maybe think about security. Maybe run Bandit, right? If we're going to go crazy. Then it kind of became the iPhone, right? Where we had Circle CI, and you're like, the UI was getting better and it was talking more to developers. You're like, oh my God, this is exciting. And when the first iPhone came out, I loved my Sony Ericsson, right? I loved my Motorola Flip. And this iPhone came out with no apps, and you're like, what the hell am I supposed to do with this shit? The reality was, the Circle CI was that. People started to see the power of going, you know what, doing a pen test at the end of the application build, that's not probably the best thing, right? We're starting to learn. Where we are now is GitHub, and GitLab, if anybody uses GitLab. And we've now started to see where application security, as Dinis said, is that it's so as part of the life cycle that you don't even think about it anymore. Right? We got used to the fully automated worlds of doing things. But that kind of gave rise to a very ugly period of security that, to be fair, we were all involved in the time, but it wasn't the best time. And that was where security blocked everything, right? We all did it. You're not going to release that on the internet because it's possibly insecure. Security says no. We've all done it. We were all there. Developers are stupid, man. Like, what an idiot. Doesn't understand SQL injection. What a prick. We all did it. That period is literally the bit that I try to forget because, wow, we did things wrong. And there's a really great book written by Gene Kim, The Phoenix Project. It's a phenomenal book if everybody's not read it. But it really delves into how information security is always flashing their badges at people and making urgent demands, right? Regardless of the consequences to the rest of the organization, which is why we don't invite them to many meetings. That quote's never left my head. And if you look back at security at the time, especially application security, you're like, wow, we weren't embracing developers. Then we come on to the fourth revolution. And this is where I think we're doing the most things. Now, I need to caveat that. I think normal people are doing the right things. I have a big beef with the security appliance industry. I think single-handedly, they are the biggest cancer that we have on the internet. The products that are meant to keep us secure are built using bubblegum, old toilet rolls, and people who truly do not give a shit about our security. The firewall vendors, the VPN vendors, the secure application vendors, the ones that the Chinese love so much. The VPNs that use CGI scripts with 15-year-old supply chain things and still sell. They are the problem. And if any of you probably unfortunately follow me on Twitter, you know I do not give a shit anymore. I'm calling these idiots out because my data is on more toilet walls than I care to imagine. Those people are not doing the cool fourth revolution. But what we have seen a massive change of is tooling. As Dinis alluded to, we're going to start seeing a fifth revolution soon. And that's going to be the rise of people understanding how to use LLMs. When he said about putting LLMs in line, I'm like, oh, shits and giggles, do it. What is the worst that could happen? Putting APIs to an LLM, ooh, that's interesting. Do it, but have a rollback. But I think we're going to see better tooling because up until now, security tooling in the application space hasn't been the best. DAST tooling. When I started to play around with DAST tooling, with GitHub pipelines and actions, big name vendors came to me and said, yeah, we support GitHub Actions. Here is a 64 meg jar file that goes in your build pipeline. I'm like, oh, shit, what? Yeah. When it builds, the pipeline will be busy for 4.5 hours while we do our DAST scan. I'm like, and what, pray tell, do developers do? We had to do some seriously creative hacks. We have other SaaS tools that still today expect you to upload a zip file of your repo into their 1997 Lotus Notes inspired console to run a report, and you get back a PDF. These are tools that are sold at RSA. So the security industry is not the one evolving, and I'm hoping this is where we start to kickstart it. Automation truly has made things phenomenal. At Black Hat December, myself and a few colleagues released a bit of research. We're doing a lot on post-quantum cryptography, which for a blonde like me is a hard word to say, but we are doing it. And we had an itch. And I said at the time, I wonder how many of the world's open source packages, the supply chain that we all talk about, are vulnerable to not supporting post-quantum ciphers. And we said, right, how do we do this at scale? Because what we need to do is take CodeQL, which I am the ultimate fanboy in. I think it's one of the best variant analysis, static analysis frameworks out there. But how do we run it across thousands of GitHub repos? So I bamboozled friends at GitHub and said, hey, Nero, I got this idea. And we did. We worked with Microsoft, we got GitHub, and we wrote the CodeQL queries, and we decided to run it across the top 5,000 dependencies on GitHub. This is the stuff that the world builds upon. We could not have done so without automation, without GitHub Actions, without automating that at scale. And this was security, this was variant analysis at scale. And for me, it kind of dawned upon me, I was like, wow, in 20 odd years, we've gone from, if you want to do a static analysis review of a site, it was mostly manual, to now we're running it against the top projects for Python, C++. We're doing Java, it's a bit weird. We're doing stuff like Go. We might even do Ruby, because there's still some Ruby freaks out there. But we managed to do it at scale, and we got back reams of information. And yes, we did use large language models to try and understand the information, because why wouldn't you do that? The next one is integration. We finally moved away from security tools being the odd one out to now where we can fit into the pipelines. And developers actually go, you know what, the build takes 7 minutes. Hey, that's really cool. Like, we can actually do that. We're no longer pushing stuff out. And I think that's, for me, probably one of the biggest changes I've seen in 2 decades of application security, where we're finally being invited to the parties. And that never really happened before. Nobody wanted security people in the room. And I don't blame them. We're an odd bunch at the best of times, right? But we're now being invited because we're not blocking. And then finally, knowledge. One of the biggest successes I've seen with OWASP is that we've shared knowledge that traditionally was never accessible. So Sam talked about ASVS, and the ASVS has been a project of mine for a couple of years. It's written in many languages. It's used across the planet. I'm co-chair of UK government cybersecurity advisory. So I'm now doing civil servicey type stuff. And we're now looking at how we take standards like that and push it out to government so that people start building stuff. That knowledge is all open source. It's all in GitHub. People do pull requests. And we've managed to do it so that it's no longer hidden. So at DevSecCon a couple of years ago, we were working on version 4 of ASVS. We didn't know who was using it. And it's a really odd thing to say, right? But when you work on an open source project, you put the code out there, you've walked out naked, you hope people don't laugh, but you don't really know who's using it. So I asked a very simple question when I did a keynote. Can anybody who's using it just come and tell me afterwards? Like, I won't publish it, just come and tell me afterwards. And lots of people did. We know that State Department's using it, we know that HMRC's using it. We know that we've got 2 nuclear reactors that use it. And the knowledge is all there open for people to use and abuse and do what they want. NASA is using it. What? NASA is using it. Fucking amazing. I did not know that. That's made my night. Like, we have this ability to share knowledge. And that was always the idea right at the start of OWASP. 23 years ago, we were like, this kind of knowledge shouldn't be closed. It shouldn't be hidden. It should be available for everybody. And it sounds really cliched and corny to say that now, but that was kind of the premise. And I think this is where what's happening next, as I go into the twilight of my career, what we're seeing with GPTs and how GPTs can be trained on that kind of knowledge. For the first time ever, really complex subjects, like understanding how to build secure applications, understanding how to write code QL queries, understanding how satellites work if you are Russian spies, is amazing. And that brings me into the guardrails thing. You better get that. 10 years ago, like I said, security was that blocker. Nobody wanted to run security. The analogy that I've loved for a very long time, as I'm a kid from the early 70s, is that my parents used to love bowling. As a concept, bowling is a bit weird. One, you used to put your feet into somebody else's stinky shoes. Never did understand that one. But basically, you could throw that ball down the alley. If you were really bad, they could pop up the guardrails down the side. No matter how hard, I still take my kids bowling now. I've got twin boys who are 7. They destroy everything. They hate authority and they want to break everything. They get that from their mother. But the guardrails means that they can lob the ball down, the bowling ball down, and it will hit the pins. We now have these guardrails. You know, that is SemGrep, which is another open source tool which I completely love. It removed the need to have these expensive static analysis frameworks that are frankly rubbish, and people can use it and adopt it and put it to their pipelines. And on the right is CodeQL, SemGrep and GitHub Actions. And it means that anybody can now start to do proper security and security engineering without getting in the way. And then you have this really cool thing, and that's coming in GitHub, whoever's using it soon, where you now have the option to do auto-fixing. So one of the things with CodeQL is that it can find really cool bugs, And then it will use Copilot, and it will suggest auto fixes. And it suggests it based on the code base that it's learning from. So it can automatically do a pull request. So it will then reference ASVS to say why this is a bad thing. And I fixed your code for you. And do you want to merge that pull request? Security has gone from being the ugly people in the world that say no to we now have a benefit. We now have this really cool thing that application bugs are being squashed. And I've got AI helping me do it. And this is phenomenal. All that knowledge is being pulled together. So OWASP London is 20 years old. OWASP itself is 23 years old. I'm only 23. I'm really intrigued, like seeing so many people here still interested in application security. And I think the term application security has gone a bit weird. Back in the day, it was a browser, an app, a backend database. That web doesn't exist anymore. So I'm really intrigued to see what the next 20 years are going to bring from an OWASP perspective, from an application security space, because if anything that we've seen in the last 20 years, the next 5 years, I think we'll see probably even more revolutions than I have before. So a massive thank you from me for like being here, the fact that it's 20 years later, for a little idea I had with my friends Dinis and Ivan. And Ivan can say how he wasn't there, but he was, right? We started this. We never expected OWASP to grow what it was. I am one of the old farts of OWASP. I still get amazed when I go to the cons and see thousands of people. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the night. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Daniel. Amazing insight and to the past 20 years and into the future. So what's going to happen next? We are going to do a Q&A session while Andra is getting handheld mic so we can actually ask you, the audience here. I'm going to ask Harsh to answer a question from someone who asked it online. And Harsh, how did you manage to inject the issuer value? Wasn't the responsibility of the identity provider not to use user input issuer values?
Give me the mic.
Oh, you need the mic. You can use mine. Oh, you got it. Okay, it's coming.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the question. So in this one, the issuer was from the JOT itself. So it wasn't like user supplied. And the key that was looked up to verify the signature was the one that was tied to that issuer. So the identity service wasn't really trusting user input. It was still verifying the signature. It's just that the issuer that the identity service looked at and the one that the API infra looked at happened to be different because they were using different JSON parsers. Hope that makes sense.
Cool. Do we have any questions for Harsh in the audience, or for Dinis, or for Daniel? Yeah. 1 second, I'll give you the mic so everyone online could hear you as well.
I have a question for Dinis. Maybe if the LLMs really understand all the code, maybe the business can directly talk to the LLMs and they will even deploy to the clouds. So maybe the entire software development lifecycle will be gone, and app security will be a consideration for the LLMs, not for us.
So is this working?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that question is, I don't agree with that. You're saying that will the developers disappear, right? Won't we need developers anymore, or won't we need AppSec, right? I think it's a bit like that when people say, don't we need teachers anymore? I think we need them even more. Now the question is, who's going to evolve into that space, right? So the reality is that to think that an LLM can replace a developer is not to understand what a developer actually does, right? Like developers don't just put things together, right? They think, they map things, they come up with solutions, right? And developers today code on top of technology that's probably as revolutionary as the LLMs, right? You compare a developer today that works in PyCharm versus a developer that was working with Notepad or Vim, right? 20 years ago. So, but I think that if you freeze in time, yes, because there's individuals today, the same way there was industries that were doing typewriting and there were people writing cards and carriage, right? I think there's a whole bunch of industries that are going to change. I think we are a bit more fortunate because I think we can change with that. So I feel that what's going to happen is you're going to have a lot more quality software. It's a bit like, if you think about it, at the moment, if you go to a project and say, by the way, team, you need to have a P&L, you need to have project management on steroids, you need to have really good documentation, you need to have architecture diagrams, you need to have coding standards, you need to have rules for analysis, you need to have applications that can react, you need to have observability. It's like you lost most teams, right, by now. But we get into a world where that is possible, right? So I actually think that it's a great time to be a developer, right? Because I think a lot of the frustrations that developers have can be addressed. It's not a great time if you think you stop learning, right? If you want, I like what I'm doing, well, you're going to be, replaced very soon, right? But I think if you are curious and if you learn, I think this is a really good time. And on AppSec, I think there's still, industries don't disappear, right? I think industries are very good at kind of holding on, but I do think there will be a cannibalization, right, of some industries that will become super good on it. So for example, if AppSec freezes in time, like it is today, a QA GenAI environment will take over, right? Because they were doing AppSec. It's a bit like GitHub, right? GitHub is not doing security because they focus on security. They're just doing code quality, right? It's just security happens to be one of the things they do. And you can brand it as security, but that also works for testing, for quality, for running unit tests, the whole jazz, right? So I think it's a great opportunity, right, on that.
Excellent. Any more questions from the audience? Because I have one online. Let me read the online question. I think this is for you again, Dinis.
Okay.
Maybe all of you can have a stab at it. It's a question about AI. And the question is, how can AI replace pen testing completely? Because AI can identify vulnerability, but in order to exploit it, human interaction is required.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think AI will replace pen testers, right? I think in fact, I think it's a great time to be a pen tester now, right? Because it's like we were saying, I think this is going back, 20 years, right? It's nice to be in an industry where there's a lot to do. I think sometimes there are industries that you join the industry, it's like, yeah, all the innovation, happened 20 years ago. It's a bit like you, a musician, you go, yeah, the Beatles had a great run, and Queen had a great run, and Jimi Hendrix had a great run, but there's a point where there's only so much you can innovate. Maybe not the best analogy, but I think we get to the point where I think GenAI is changing so much in a way that we can access now. It's a bit like the internet, coming together. So I think it's a great opportunity for pen testers, and we still need the humans in the loop, right?
I agree. I mean, it's funny.
Oh, you have a mic.
You hear like a lot of the predictions that AI will revolutionize the offensive space. That's been my world for a long time. And indeed, it's helping on the low-hanging fruit, just like Burp did.
Yeah.
Right? When Burp Spider and Truder came out, when WebInspect came out, it was like, you don't need app testers anymore. It's still a tool. You still need a tool to run the tool, right? And I think that's the thing. A lot of the times that we're seeing at the moment, especially in the defensive space, like some of the arguments are, GenAI will help write better malware. Will it, bollocks? Like literally, anybody who uses it to look at the code, you're like, it's still trained on other people's code. I think it's going to automate a hell of a lot of stuff, and I think that will be the biggest change. Phishing emails. For once, we no longer have to worry about Nigerian spelling and the Russians trying to sound English. And we actually saw that with Microsoft and OpenAI. Like the first time ever we've had a real-world study of what are offensive actors doing with AI. Well, two things. Phishing and understanding satellite images, which I'll admit blew me away as well. Right, but it's very specific, right? Vlad sitting in his cave going, how do I look at the satellite images? Oh, ChatGPT. Right? But it's not like they're going, can you write me polymorphic code that bypasses CrowdStrike? You still need a human being to do that. So I think it's going to be an interesting time, but I don't think we'll get rid of pen testing. That's my prediction. I'll probably be proved wrong, but yeah.
And on the defensive side, right, like one of the biggest, by the way, one of the things I really like these days to talk about is everybody has this shared responsibility model, right? I think we need to kick that out of the curve, right? I think that started with Microsoft really well. A lot of other companies, which is like, hey, we do this bit, we give you this, it's crazy insecure. No, it's secure out of the box, but as soon as you start using it, it's really bad. I think the cloud providers got away with it a lot. I want to give credit to Google. I think Google nailed it really nice, because Google talks about share fate, right? And I think that's what it is. In fact, in AppSec, it's the same thing. We are together in this, right? It's about share fate with all this stuff. And one of the things I always dislike is this idea that the attackers have all the advantage. They only have to find one exploit, they only have to find one vulnerability, they attack you anywhere.
And they have lots of time.
They have lots of time. It's bollocks, right? Like the attackers have to succeed 20 things before they exploit. Now, if you give them a motorway for those 20 things, guess what? It's really easy, right? But I really like the defense model where you just need the attackers to make one mistake. right? Once they make one mistake, you should be on it, right? And you don't have to play fair, right? You don't actually have to have a website that behaves the same way for an attacker, for a non-attacker. You have anybody brute forcing your username and passwords, guess what? Randomize the results, right? You just polluted their entire usernames and password list that they cannot sell anymore because they go to sell that as they has GAMI accounts valid on it, right? So I think that it's a great time to be on the defense side. I like this idea that applications react to the attackers. I like applications that have zero tolerance for attackers, for misbehaved things. And actually, you know who's gonna love those apps? Is the business people. Because again, 90% of the attacks you'll see is the business going south, is a bug published on this part of the app that just blew up that part of the app there. Suddenly, if your app reacts, it finds those problems. Yep. But the same way that you find those problems for business, you will find those problems for AppSec.
Good. Unfortunately, we're out of time for more questions, but you can ask more questions in the pub and after the event. We have to move on to quiz, so let's thank all our speakers one more time. Andra, okay. We need to Googlers. Where's Monica, Omar? We need some support from Google so we can do the.
And before all the speakers go, can you guys take your small gifts and maybe we can all take a picture before you guys have to
photo opportunity.
with the small photos, yeah, that you've received. Thank you. Where's Dinis?
Yeah, do that. Yeah, because we have a photographer, right?
There we go. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, there's a picture frame.
Yes, I hope you guys like them.
So this is a WASP, right?
By the way,
to be a
right?
WASP, it's a
For the
bundle.
I had
syndrome,
an open source
across the crowd, right? Across the crowd, right? I literally wrote my presentation in between 4 o'clock today.
We all know.
And did that.
You always do that.
But my point of that, right, is that it's very easy to look at stuff like this and think, wow, that's pretty cool. Like, we're all making this shit up. Like, we've been doing this for 20 years, and we built an entire career on top of that. And my only advice, don't compromise. Innovate. Like, present here. Right? Like, it's really cool. Like, we're in an industry that we get away with it, right? But it looks way more polished from the outside than it is on the inside, right? So again, just ad lib, right? And then.
Well, I'm really disappointed that you didn't use ChatGPT to write your presentation, because that would be more appropriate.
You got it.
I want to add just one thought to the previous conversation about AI. I think the biggest problem we've had in security is the economics of it doesn't work for defenders. Yeah. And I think what AI can bring to the table is that it can turn that around, because suddenly you can do what you need to do to defend very cheaply. Yeah. Whereas playing this warfare has been asymmetric until now. And who knows, maybe AI changes the things.
Excellent. Can I ask you all to hold your frame so we can have a professional photograph?
What's my name?
Yeah, my name is it.
All good?
Cool.
Okay, perfect.
Ooh,
all right. Well, thank you guys very much. Yes, if you take part in the quiz.
Excellent. Do stick around. We are moving on to the quiz. So Omar and Monica back on stage, and it's quiz time. So everyone, please get your mobile phones ready. Scan the QR code. We have 3 prizes tonight. We have Google Pixel 8 Pro.
Nice.
And we have 2 different Lego sets.
Yeah, that's true.
International Space Station and Batman.
Can we have a show of hands when most of you have created the accounts? You'll only need a username, a password.
Yes, don't bother creating sophisticated. Just make sure your username is unique.
Yeah,
your password can
Don't worry about passwords.
Because I doubt you will ever need to log into this ever again. This is just for us.
Just don't use an existing password you have in other applications.
Exactly, exactly.
Also, if anybody wants to leave, can you please all group outside, because we can't ferry each of you downstairs on your own.
Everyone will need to be escorted. Unfortunately, that's the policy, because we can't get into the lifts without a Google staff escorting us.
And the Google staff is here. All right. How do we?
I think you need to play it and always answer the wrong question. Okay.
Awesome.
This way it will be more fun.
Can we share this screen, please?
Yeah, can we share the screen, please? Is it going to work?
I don't know. It's connected.
Yeah.
Not yet. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah. Do we need can we do the lectern?
Just plug. Yeah.
Wait, what? Oh,
Unplug and plug?
Oh. Thank you.
oh right.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you take it then.
Perfect.
Just wait a bit.
Yeah.
I can maybe good going.
So how are you doing? All ready? All you have your accounts or?
Oh, already answering questions. Okay, that's perfect.
Okay, you're going next.
Yeah.
By the way, is everybody joining the pub? Maybe can you raise hands just to know how many people is going? 4 people. Okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah.
Tough crowd. Okay, fine. So 5 people going to the pub. Great.
My mic is on me. Cool.
All right. Is everybody ready with the counts? No? Okay.
I'm just
That's
waiting
my
for.
mic.
Yes.
We're going to have 20 questions for 20th anniversary.
Yeah.
And you have to answer them in 5
Here we
minutes.
go. Here we go.
Okay, question number 1. What does OWASP stand for? Open Web Application Security Project, Open Worldwide Application Security Project, Organizing Wicked Awesome Security Parties,
Yes.
or Open World Application Security Partnership? Tough one.
You don't have to choose one, Sam, by the way. You can just go next.
Okay, which OWASP project is designed to be a guideline for secure code development? OWASP Top 10, OWASP Developer Guide, OWASP Code Review Guide, or OWASP Development Guide?
I cannot see Sam.
I don't know. He's hiding.
Come on.
He's hiding.
Which of the following is not a real OWASP project? OWASP JuShop, OWASP PAMAS, OWASP CSurf, or OWASP Defect Dojo? Next question. What type of security issue does the OWASP DepScan aim to detect? Cross-site scripting, insecure dependencies, insufficient logging and monitoring, or mobile vulnerabilities? What is OpenCRE? Credential scanner, an OWASP standard, a SaaS tool, or interactive content linking platform for uniting security standards and guidelines into one overview? When did Google celebrate its 25th anniversary? September 2023, January 2024, July 2020, or September 2024?
It was recent. Just that's a clue.
When did Google actually go public? In 2000, 2001, 2003, or 2004?
Long time ago.
An idea.
In what year did Google introduce its first Android smartphone? Do you remember the first ever smartphone? Was it 2005? Was it 2008?
Android.
Was it 2010 or 2012? Here's an interview question for you. In API security, what is the primary role of Auth 2.0? Data encryption, user authentication, authorization framework, or API rate limiting? What was the name of the street where the first OWASP London meetup happened? If you watched that screenshot carefully, you should know the answer. Was that Portugal Street, Italy Street, Belgium Street, or Spain Street? In what year the first version of OWASP Top 10 was released? 2001, 2003, 2004, or 2007? Who created OWASP? Dan Cuthbert, Mark Curthy, Dinis Cruz, or Andrew van der Stok?
That was so quick.
What risk was added to OWASP Top 10 in 2021? SQL injection, XSRF, insecure design, or security misconfiguration? Which one of these is a risk in OWASP Top 10 for LLMs? Training data poisoning, broken authentication, logging and monitoring, or deserialization? Who created OWASP Top 10? Was that Ivan Ristic? Was that Jeff Williams? Was that Mark Curthy? Was that Dinis Cruz?
We need to check.
We need to check for the kids, yes. Okay, so just take some time to answer them because that was very fast.
Yeah. Did you got all the questions? Yeah.
So when you're done,
Yeah, you're
raise
still in the
your
process,
hand.
yeah.
Yes. Okay. They're done. So when we have most raised hands, we just go for the thing. Okay. Even 2. Awesome.
One more question. How many of you are going to talk about this amazing event? Yeah. Brilliant. Yes. So hopefully see you OWASP 30th anniversary, right?
We're going to be old.
Maybe, yeah.
Can we have another raise of hands just to see like how is things going? Okay.
Okay. Yeah. So probably 1 more minute.
It's in my bag.
Sorry?
Oh, the app's time out? Oh.
No, everybody. Was that the OWASP? No.
No.
Sam, I think
we have the results.
Do
you want to present the prices?
Okay, we have the answers now.
You have the answers there.
Leaderboard, yes. How's it works? Score 20. Oh, wow.
So who is Ankem 999?
Is that Sam?
No. I'm here to give the price. Let's do, because obviously the second and third prize is Amit and Bibek. So let's invite these guys on stage.
Where are you? Amit.
Woo! We're missing one person.
So so who's? Let's go back to the.
We're missing one person.
Yes.
Where's the winner?
Who is?
Where is the winner?
Was it? No? Okay.
Okay, so maybe the winner is not here. Maybe we can give it to the... I was like, almost like...
So this is
maybe
the second prize.
Maybe let's give it to the fourth place. Who's Bibek? Bibek Cyber?
Bibek is...
Okay, Bibek, come over because we don't know where is Ankem, so... Go for it.
So, as you can see, this is sponsored by Phoenix Security. Thanks. So who is second prize?
Which is now first prize.
Which is now first prize, okay, yes.
No, the first prize.
Yeah. Okay, oh yeah, true, because Amit is not there, yeah.
So now you're the first prize. Congratulations. Oh, you prefer the Lego?
Yes.
You look happy.
Yeah. Because there's no... And second prize goes to Bibek. So obviously the first one was, second one was, third one, the last one.
Vivek, it's Vivek.
Yeah, Vivek, okay.
Vivek and Vivek.
I'm Vivek. Okay, got it. Right. Okay, so thank you so much. Congratulations.
Wait, a picture? You want a picture? Yes. Hi. There is Mihai.
The sponsors.
The sponsors.
Well, if you can bring them in, come on.
Andra.
I think it's just us.
Just us.
Yeah, it's in the middle. If you.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Big thank you to Google for hosting this amazing event. Don't go too far because we're still gonna network and drink in the pub. This is where we're going. This is the Barrel Vault. To get there, it's very easy. Exit the venue. You have to turn right, and then you turn right again when you at the first right, and you will see it in front of you. You need someone from Google to escort you out. So please make sure that you form an orderly queue by the lifts. And we'll hope to see you at the next event. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.